A little beggar girl is found unconscious among the prized horses of a reclusive millionaire. Her ancient locket, engraved with familiar initials, draws attention to a connection with the past. When the millionaire discovers who the girl truly is, he is left shattered. The early morning mist clung to the lush green fields surrounding Thornbury Estate, a sprawling property that seemed to exist in a world of its own. White picket fences stretched as far as the eye could see, enclosing pastures where prize-winning horses grazed peacefully. At the center of it all stood a majestic mansion, its Victorian architecture, a testament to a bygone era of opulence and grandeur. Inside, Maxwell Thornbury, the estate's reclusive millionaire owner, sat in his study, nursing a cup of black coffee as he gazed out the window. His weathered face, etched with lines of both wisdom and sorrow, reflected in the glass superimposed over the misty landscape beyond. At 55, Maxwell had long ago retreated from the world of high finance that had made him his fortune, choosing instead the solitude of his rural empire. As the first rays of sunlight began to pierce through the fog, Maxwell's daily routine was about to be shattered in a way he could never have anticipated. A frantic knocking at the study door broke the morning silence. "Mr. Thornbury, Mr. Thornbury." The voice belonged to Thomas, the young stable hand. "You need to come quickly, sir. There's a child in the stable." Maxwell's brow furrowed in confusion. "A child? What nonsense are you talking about, boy?" "Please, sir," Thomas pleaded, his voice trembling. "She's unconscious. We don't know where she came from or how she got here." For a moment, Maxwell hesitated. He had grown accustomed to his solitary existence, and the thought of any disruption to his carefully ordered world filled him with unease. But the urgency in Thomas's voice stirred something within him. A flicker of the man he used to be, perhaps. "Very well," he sighed, setting down his coffee cup. "Lead the way." As they hurried across the manicured lawn towards the stables, the morning dew soaked through Maxwell's leather shoes. The air was thick with the scent of grass and horses, a smell that usually brought him comfort, but now seemed to heighten his anxiety. The stable, a grand structure of polished wood and gleaming brass fixtures, loomed before them. Inside, the usual morning bustle had ceased, replaced by an eerie quiet punctuated only by the occasional nervous whinny of a horse. "Over here, sir," Thomas said, leading Maxwell to the last stall. What Maxwell saw there stopped him in his tracks. Lying on a bed of fresh straw was a small figure, a girl no more than 7 years old. Her clothes were tattered and caked with mud, her dark hair a tangled mess around a face pale with fever. In her tiny, dirt-smudged hand, she clutched something tightly, a small, tarnished medallion. "Good Lord," Maxwell whispered, kneeling beside the child. He reached out a tentative hand, touching her forehead. It was burning hot. "How long has she been here?" "We found her just minutes ago, sir," Thomas replied. "No one saw her come in. It's like she just appeared." Maxwell's mind raced. Who was this child? How had she managed to find her way onto his property, past the security gates and guard dogs? And why here, of all places? As he pondered these questions, the girl stirred slightly, her fingers tightening around the medallion. Something about the way she held it struck Maxwell as oddly familiar, though he couldn't quite place why. "We need to get her to the house," Maxwell decided, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. "Thomas, go ahead and inform Mrs. Witherspoon. Tell her to prepare a guest room and call for Dr. Henderson immediately." As Thomas rushed off, Maxwell gently scooped the girl into his arms. She was alarmingly light, and he could feel the heat of her fever through her ragged clothes. As he carried her across the grounds, he couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious child was about to change everything. Approaching the mansion, Maxwell saw Mrs. Witherspoon, his longtime housekeeper and de facto head of the household staff, waiting at the entrance. Her usually impassive face was etched with concern and something else. Was it fear? "Mr. Thornbury," she began, her voice tight with barely contained emotion, "I must protest. We have no idea who this child is or where she came from. She could be dangerous or worse, part of some scheme to—" "Enough, Mrs. Witherspoon," Maxwell cut her off, his voice surprisingly gentle but firm. "Whatever the circumstances, this is a child in need of our help. We can sort out the details later." As he brushed past her and entered the house, Maxwell couldn't help but wonder at his own actions. For years he had shut himself away from the world, from any possibility of emotional entanglement. Yet here he was, bringing a complete stranger, a child no less, into his home. The girl stirred in his arms, her eyes fluttering open for a brief moment. In that instant, Maxwell caught a glimpse of deep, haunted brown eyes that seemed to hold secrets far beyond her years. Then, as quickly as they had opened, her eyes closed again, and she fell back into her feverish sleep. Maxwell climbed the grand staircase, each step echoing through the silent halls of the mansion. As he reached the top, a thought struck him with such force that he nearly stumbled. The medallion the girl clutched so tightly, why did it seem so familiar? With a growing sense of unease, Maxwell realized that this mysterious child might be connected to his past in ways he couldn't yet fathom. As he laid her gently on the bed in the freshly prepared guest room, he knew that his life of seclusion was about to be irrevocably changed. The sound of a car pulling up outside announced the arrival of Dr. Henderson. As Maxwell stood watching the sleeping child, he made a silent vow. Whatever secrets this girl held, whatever storm she might bring into his carefully ordered world, he would protect her. For in her vulnerable state, she had awakened something in him that he thought long dead, a sense of purpose, and perhaps, just perhaps, the faintest glimmer of hope. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 3 times, its deep, resonant tones echoing through the hushed corridors of Thornbury Manor. Maxwell Thornbury sat in a plush armchair beside the guest room bed, his eyes fixed on the small figure lying motionless beneath the covers. For hours he had maintained his vigil, barely moving, barely breathing, as if afraid that the slightest sound might shatter the fragile peace that had descended upon the room. Dr. Henderson had come and gone, leaving behind a list of instructions and a promise to return in the morning. The diagnosis was clear: severe exhaustion, malnutrition, and a high fever. The child's condition was serious but not critical. With proper care, she would recover. As the last echoes of the clock faded away, the girl stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, revealing those same deep brown orbs that had struck Maxwell earlier. For a moment she seemed disoriented, her gaze darting around the unfamiliar room before finally settling on Maxwell. Fear flickered across her face, and she instinctively clutched the medallion tighter to her chest. Maxwell leaned forward slowly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "It's all right," he said softly, his voice gentle in a way that surprised even him. "You're safe here. Can you tell me your name?" The girl's lips moved, but no sound came out. She swallowed hard and tried again, her voice barely above a whisper. Lily, Maxwell repeated, offering a small smile. "That's a beautiful name. I'm Maxwell. You're at my home, Thornbury Manor. Do you remember how you got here, Lily?" Lily's brow furrowed in concentration, but her eyes soon filled with tears of frustration. She shook her head vigorously, then winced at the movement. "Shh, it's okay," Maxwell soothed, fighting the urge to reach out and comfort her. "Don't push yourself. Can you tell me anything you do remember?" Lily closed her eyes, her small face scrunched in concentration. A lady," she mumbled, "holding my hand, and horses. Lots of horses." Maxwell's heart skipped a beat. "Horses?" he prompted gently. Lily nodded, her eyes still closed. "Running fast and smoke, lots of smoke." Her eyes snapped open suddenly, wide with fear. "And shouting, so much shouting." As if the memories were too much to bear, Lily curled into herself, silent tears streaming down her face. Maxwell felt a lump forming in his throat. What horrors had this child witnessed? A soft knock at the door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Witherspoon entered, carrying a tray with a bowl of steaming soup and a glass of water. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of the awake child, but she quickly composed herself. "I thought our guest might be hungry," she said, her tone carefully neutral as she set the tray on the bedside table. Lily's eyes darted between Mrs. Witherspoon and Maxwell, fear and uncertainty evident in her gaze. Maxwell nodded encouragingly. "It's all right, Lily, this is Mrs. Witherspoon. She's here to help take care of you." Mrs. Witherspoon's expression softened almost imperceptibly as she looked at the frightened child. "Hello, dear," she said, her usually crisp voice gentler than Maxwell had ever heard it. "Would you like some soup? It might help you feel better." Lily hesitated for a moment before nodding shyly. As Mrs. Witherspoon helped her sit up and arrange the tray, Maxwell couldn't help but notice how the housekeeper's efficient movements were tempered with a surprising tenderness. "Mrs. Witherspoon," Maxwell said quietly, "could you stay with Lily for a moment? I need to make a phone call." In his study, Maxwell paced back and forth, the phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, I understand it's late, Charles," he said to his lawyer on the other end of the line. "But this is important. I need you to look into any reports of missing children in the area. Yes, particularly any involving fires or horses." As he hung up the phone, Maxwell's eyes were drawn to a photograph on his desk. It showed a beautiful woman with long, dark hair sitting atop a magnificent black stallion. Elizabeth, his late wife, the renowned equestrian whose tragic accident 5 years ago had driven Maxwell into his self-imposed exile. The resemblance between Elizabeth and Lily was subtle but undeniable. The same deep brown eyes, the same delicate features, and that medallion. Maxwell's heart raced as a long-buried memory surfaced. He had given Elizabeth a similar medallion on their first anniversary, engraved with her initials. Could it be the same one? But how? Elizabeth had been wearing it when she... Maxwell shook his head, trying to clear the fog of confusion and speculation. He was getting ahead of himself. There had to be a rational explanation for all of this. As he made his way back to the guest room, Maxwell paused in the doorway, taking in the scene before him. Mrs. Witherspoon was sitting on the edge of the bed, gently stroking Lily's hair as the child drifted off to sleep. The empty soup bowl on the tray was a small victory. "She ate it all," Mrs. Witherspoon reported softly as she noticed Maxwell. Poor thing was famished. There was a hint of something in her voice, concern, perhaps even affection, that belied her earlier reservations. "Thank you, Mrs. Witherspoon," Maxwell said sincerely. "You've been invaluable." As the housekeeper left the room, Maxwell resumed his post in the armchair. He watched the steady rise and fall of Lily's chest, his mind a whirlwind of questions and theories. Who was this child? Where had she come from? And why did he feel such an inexplicable connection to her? As the night wore on, Maxwell found himself dozing off, lulled by the rhythmic sound of Lily's breathing. His dreams were a confused jumble of images: Elizabeth laughing atop her favorite horse, the acrid smell of smoke, a tiny hand clutching a familiar medallion. He was jolted awake by a sound, a whimper so soft he might have imagined it. Lily was tossing in her sleep, her face contorted in distress. Without thinking, Maxwell moved to the bed, gently taking her small hand in his. "Shh," he murmured. "You're safe now. I promise." As if by magic, Lily's features relaxed, and she settled back into a peaceful sleep. Maxwell remained there, her tiny hand in his, feeling a fierce protectiveness wash over him. Whatever secrets Lily's past held, whatever challenges lay ahead, Maxwell knew one thing with absolute certainty: his life would never be the same again. The walls he had built around his heart over the past 5 years were crumbling, and in their place, something new was taking root. Hope, purpose, and the first stirrings of a love he had thought himself incapable of feeling ever again. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would unravel the mystery surrounding this child, and in doing so, perhaps find the path back to the man he used to be, the man Elizabeth had loved, the man who knew how to open his heart to the world. Little did Maxwell know that the journey ahead would test him in ways he could never have imagined, forcing him to confront not only the ghosts of his past, but also the shadows that lurked in the present, threatening the fragile new bond forming between him and the mysterious child who had appeared so unexpectedly in his life. The days following Lily's arrival at Thornbury Manor passed in a blur of worried consultations with Dr. Henderson, hushed conversations among the staff, and long nights of vigilant watch by Maxwell. Gradually, as Lily's fever subsided and her strength returned, a new routine began to take shape within the grand old house. On a crisp morning, exactly a week after Lily's mysterious appearance, Maxwell stood at the window of his study, watching as Mrs. Witherspoon led the child out onto the expansive lawn. The transformation in the little girl was remarkable. Though still thin and pale, there was a spark of life in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "She's recovering well, sir," Thomas said, entering the room with a stack of newspapers. "It's like watching a wilted flower come back to life." Maxwell nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Indeed, though I fear the real challenges are only beginning. We still know so little about her past, about how she came to be here. As if on cue, the phone on Maxwell's desk rang. It was Charles, his lawyer. "Max, I've got some information for you," Charles said, his voice crackling over the line. "It's not much, but it's a start. There have been no recent reports of missing children matching Lily's description in the immediate area. However, I did find something interesting about a fire at a neighboring property about 7 years ago." Maxwell's heart raced. "Go on." "The old Hartley place, about 10 miles from your estate. It burned down in the middle of the night. The official report says there were no casualties, but there were rumors, whispers about a child who was never found." Maxwell sank into his chair, his mind reeling. Could Lily be connected to this long-ago tragedy? And if so, where had she been all these years? "There's more, Max," Charles continued. "The Hartley place was known for its horses. They had a breeding program that rivaled yours at one point. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed was still frustratingly incomplete." Maxwell thanked Charles and hung up, his thoughts in turmoil. A commotion outside drew his attention back to the window. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Lily had wandered away from Mrs. Witherspoon and was now standing at the fence of the nearest paddock. Inside, Maxwell's prized stallion, Thunderbolt, was trotting back and forth, clearly agitated. Thunderbolt was notorious for his volatile temperament. Even Maxwell's most experienced handlers approached him with caution. "Good Lord," Maxwell muttered, already moving towards the door. But before he could take more than a few steps, he froze, transfixed by the scene unfolding before him. Lily had slipped through the fence and was now standing in the paddock, her small hand outstretched towards the massive horse. Mrs. Witherspoon stood rooted to the spot, her face a mask of horror. Time seemed to stand still as Thunderbolt approached the child. Maxwell wanted to shout, to run, to do something, anything, to prevent the disaster he was sure was about to unfold. But he remained frozen, watching in disbelief as the great horse lowered his head to Lily's outstretched hand. The change in Thunderbolt was instantaneous and astonishing. The tension in his powerful body melted away. His ears, previously pinned back in agitation, now pricked forward with interest. Lily's lips were moving, though Maxwell was too far away to hear what she was saying. As if in a trance, Maxwell made his way outside and across the lawn. As he drew closer, he could hear Lily's voice, soft, melodic, almost like a lullaby. "That's it, big fella," she was saying. "You're just scared, aren't you? But you don't have to be, not anymore." Thunderbolt nickered softly, nuzzling Lily's hand. The girl giggled, a sound so pure and joyful that it brought unexpected tears to Maxwell's eyes. "Mr. Thornbury," Mrs. Witherspoon's anxious whisper broke the spell. What should we do?" Maxwell held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "Let her be, Mrs. Witherspoon. I've never seen Thunderbolt like this. It's remarkable." As they watched, Lily began to stroke Thunderbolt's nose, still murmuring softly to him. The horse, usually so high-strung and unpredictable, stood perfectly still, as docile as a child's pony. A memory, long buried, surfaced in Maxwell's mind. Elizabeth standing in this very paddock, her hand on Thunderbolt's flank. The horse had been a wedding gift to her, and she was the only one who could handle him. "Horses respond to what's in your heart," she had told Maxwell once. "If you're calm and open, they'll sense it. If you're afraid or closed off, they'll know that too." Watching Lily with Thunderbolt, Maxwell felt a bittersweet ache in his chest. The girl's innate connection with the horse was so reminiscent of Elizabeth that it took his breath away. "Lily," he called softly, not wanting to startle either the child or the horse. "That's very impressive. Where did you learn to handle horses like that?" Lily turned to look at him, her small face serious. "I didn't learn it, Mr. Maxwell. I just know. The horses, they talk to me. Not with words, but I can feel what they're feeling." Maxwell exchanged a glance with Mrs. Witherspoon, whose expression had shifted from fear to wonder. "And what is Thunderbolt feeling, Lily?" The girl tilted her head, as if listening to something only she could hear. "He's sad," she said finally, "and lonely. He misses someone very much, someone who used to ride him and love him." Maxwell felt as if the ground had dropped out from under him. How could this child possibly know about Elizabeth's special bond with Thunderbolt? Before he could formulate a response, Thomas came running up, out of breath. "Mr. Thornbury, sir, you need to come quickly. There's been an incident at the far paddock. The fence, it's been cut." Maxwell's mind raced. The strange occurrences around the property, the mystery surrounding Lily's appearance, could they be connected? He looked at the child still standing calmly beside the now peaceful Thunderbolt and made a decision. "Mrs. Witherspoon, please take Lily back to the house. Thomas, show me where this happened." As he followed Thomas across the grounds, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling that he was on the verge of uncovering something big. The mystery surrounding Lily was deepening, and with it the sense that his carefully ordered world was about to be turned upside down. Little did he know that the cut fence was just the beginning. Forces beyond his understanding were converging on Thornbury Manor, drawn by the presence of the mysterious child who could whisper to horses. And as the sun began to set over the rolling hills of the estate, casting long shadows across the land, Maxwell Thornbury steeled himself for whatever challenges lay ahead. He had made a silent vow to protect Lily, and he intended to keep it, no matter the cost. For in protecting her, he was beginning to realize he might just find the key to healing his own wounded heart. The discovery of the cut fence sent ripples of unease through Thornbury Manor. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across the manicured lawns, Maxwell found himself pacing the length of his study, his mind a whirlwind of questions and theories. "It doesn't make any sense, Thomas," he muttered, more to himself than to the young stable hand who stood nervously by the door. Who would want to sabotage the property? And why now, of all times? Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "Begging your pardon, sir, but, well, some of the staff have been talking. They think it might have something to do with the little girl." Maxwell's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" It's odd, isn't it? She shows up out of nowhere, and then all these strange things start happening. Some folks are saying she might be, well, bad luck." For a moment, Maxwell felt a flare of anger. How quickly people turn to superstition and fear when faced with the unknown. But as he opened his mouth to reprimand Thomas, he paused. The boy wasn't to blame for voicing the concerns of others, and dismissing them outright wouldn't help matters. "Thank you for your honesty, Thomas," Maxwell said instead, his voice measured. "I understand people are worried, but I want you to put those rumors to rest. Lily is a child in need of our protection, nothing more. Whatever is happening here, I'm certain she's not the cause." As Thomas nodded and excused himself, Maxwell sank into his leather armchair, suddenly feeling every one of his 55 years. He reached for the bottom drawer of his desk, hesitating for just a moment before pulling it open. Inside lay a small ornate wooden box that he hadn't looked at in years. With trembling hands, he lifted the lid. There, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a medallion identical to the one Lily had been clutching when she was found. Maxwell picked it up, running his thumb over the engraved initials, E.T. Elizabeth Thornbury. A soft knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. "Come in," he called, quickly replacing the medallion and closing the box. Mrs. Witherspoon entered, her usually stern face softened with concern. "Mr. Thornbury, I've settled Lily for the night, but, well, there's something you should know." Maxwell gestured for her to continue, bracing himself for more bad news. "I was helping her change for bed, and I noticed something peculiar," Mrs. Witherspoon said, her voice low. "On her right shoulder, there's a small birthmark. It's in the shape of a horseshoe." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Maxwell gripped the arms of his chair, feeling as if all the air had been sucked out of the room. "A horseshoe," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Witherspoon nodded, her eyes searching Maxwell's face. "Sir, I couldn't help but remember Mrs. Thornbury had the same birthmark, didn't she?" Maxwell closed his eyes, memories washing over him like a tidal wave. Elizabeth laughing as she showed him her birthmark on their honeymoon, joking that it was a sign she was born to ride. The same mark on their newborn daughter's shoulder, a mirror image of her mother's, their daughter, the child they had lost so long ago, or so they had been told. "Mrs. Witherspoon," Maxwell said, his voice hoarse with emotion, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone." Over the next hour, as the night deepened outside, Maxwell unburdened himself of a secret he had carried for 7 long years. He told Mrs. Witherspoon about the fire at the neighboring Hartley estate, about the frantic phone call from Elizabeth in the middle of the night. She was hysterical, Maxwell recalled, his eyes distant. Said she had done something terrible, that she needed my help. By the time I got there, the place was an inferno. I found Elizabeth at the edge of the property, covered in soot and sobbing. She kept saying, "They took her, Max, they took our baby." Mrs. Witherspoon's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "But sir, I don't understand. Your daughter. We all thought she had passed away as an infant." Maxwell nodded grimly. "That's what we told everyone. The truth was too painful, too complicated. Elizabeth had given birth in secret, fearing that her family would take the child away due to an old feud with mine. She had hidden our daughter with trusted friends at the Hartley estate. But something went wrong that night. Someone found out." The pieces were starting to fall into place, forming a picture that was both thrilling and terrifying. Could Lily be their long-lost daughter? The timing fit. The birthmark was the same and her uncanny ability with horses. But if she was, where had she been all these years? And who had brought her to Thornbury Manor? As if reading his thoughts, Mrs. Witherspoon spoke up. "Sir, if Lily is indeed your daughter, we must be careful. Whoever took her all those years ago might still be out there. They might be the ones behind the strange occurrences on the property." Maxwell nodded, a steely determination settling over him. "You're right, Mrs. Witherspoon. We need to protect Lily at all costs. But we also need to uncover the truth, for her sake and for Elizabeth's." A plan began to form in Maxwell's mind. He would need to be cautious, to investigate discreetly, but he would not rest until he had answers. "Mrs. Witherspoon, I'm going to need your help," he said, standing up and moving to the window. Outside, the moon had risen, casting a silvery glow over the estate. Somewhere out there, shadows from the past were lurking, threatening the fragile peace they had found. "Of course, sir," Mrs. Witherspoon replied, her voice filled with a fierce loyalty. "Whatever you need." As they began to discuss their next steps, neither of them noticed the small figure slipping away from the slightly ajar study door. Lily, unable to sleep and drawn by the sound of voices, had heard everything. As she padded back to her room, her young mind struggled to process what she had learned. The kind man who had taken her in might be her father. The woman in her fragmented memories, could that have been her mother? Clutching her medallion tightly, Lily crawled back into bed. As she drifted off to sleep, her dreams were filled with images of fire and horses, of a woman's gentle touch and a man's strong arms holding her tight. And through it all, a sense that she had finally, after so long, found her way home. But even as a tentative peace settled over Thornbury Manor, forces were gathering in the shadows. The mystery surrounding Lily was far from solved, and the danger was only beginning. As the night wore on, the faint sound of horses nickering in the distance seemed to carry a warning on the cool night breeze. A storm was coming, and it would test the bonds of this newfound family in ways they could never have imagined. The following days at Thornbury Manor were marked by an uneasy calm. On the surface, life continued as usual. The staff went about their duties, the horses grazed peacefully in their paddocks, and Lily's laughter could often be heard echoing through the halls. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, a current of tension ran through the estate, felt by all but spoken of by few. Maxwell found himself torn between his growing affection for Lily and his desperate need for answers. Every smile, every innocent question from the child sent a pang through his heart. Could she really be the daughter he thought lost forever? And if so, how could he possibly explain to her the complex web of secrets and lies that had shaped her young life? On a particularly crisp autumn morning, Maxwell made his way to the stables, hoping that the familiar scents and sounds would help clear his troubled mind. As he approached, he heard Lily's voice, soft and melodious, drifting from within. "That's it, girl," she was saying. "You're doing so well. I know you're scared, but you don't have to be anymore." Maxwell peered around the stable door, careful not to make a sound. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Lily was standing in the stall of Stardust, a beautiful white mare that had been Elizabeth's favorite. The horse had been inconsolable after Elizabeth's passing, becoming withdrawn and refusing to let anyone ride her. Even Maxwell had given up trying to connect with the mare, the pain of the memories too great. But now, Stardust was nuzzling Lily's hand, her eyes soft and trusting. The girl was gently stroking the horse's neck, murmuring words of comfort that seemed far too wise for her years. "Mr. Maxwell," Lily exclaimed, finally noticing him. "Look, Stardust isn't sad anymore. She just needed someone to listen to her." Maxwell approached slowly, marveling at the calm demeanor of the usually skittish mare. That's remarkable, Lily. How did you know what to do?" Lily shrugged. a small frown creasing her forehead. "I'm not sure. It's like I can hear what she's thinking. She was so lonely, Mr. Maxwell. She missed someone very much." The lump in Maxwell's throat threatened to choke him. "Yes," he managed. "She did. Lily, the woman she missed. Her name was Elizabeth. She was my wife." Lily's eyes widened. "Was she the lady in the picture? The one on your desk?" Maxwell nodded, surprised. He hadn't realized Lily had noticed the photograph. "Yes, that's her. She was very special." A shadow passed over Lily's face, a flicker of something that looked almost like recognition. But before Maxwell could question it, the moment passed, and Lily was smiling again. "Can I help take care of Stardust?" she asked eagerly. "I think she likes me." "I think she does too," Maxwell replied, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and melancholy. "Why don't you come with me? There's something I'd like to show you." He led Lily to a small tack room adjacent to the main stable. Inside, gleaming leather saddles and bridles lined the walls, but Maxwell's attention was focused on an old trunk in the corner. "This belonged to Elizabeth," he explained, kneeling beside the trunk. "I haven't opened it since. Well, in a very long time." With trembling hands, he lifted the lid. The scent of leather and lavender, Elizabeth's favorite, wafted out, bringing with it a flood of memories. Carefully, he lifted out a small riding helmet. "This was Elizabeth's first helmet," he said softly. "She wore it when she was just about your age, Lily." Lily reached out, her small fingers tracing the faded patterns on the helmet. "It's pretty," she whispered. "Would you like to try it on?" Maxwell asked, his voice thick with emotion. Lily nodded eagerly. As Maxwell gently placed the helmet on her head, he felt a jolt of recognition so strong it nearly knocked him off his feet. The way it sat on her dark curls, the determined set of her chin, it was like looking at a young Elizabeth all over again. "How does it feel?" he asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. Like I've worn it before," Lily said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But that's silly, isn't it? I've never seen it before today." Before Maxwell could respond, a commotion outside caught their attention. Raised voices and the sound of running feet broke the peaceful atmosphere of the stable. "Mr. Thornberry," it was Thomas, his face flushed with exertion as he burst into the tack room. "Sir, you need to come quickly. There's been another incident." Maxwell's heart sank. "And what is it this time, Thomas?" "It's the south pasture, sir. All the gates have been opened. The horses, they're everywhere." For a moment, Maxwell felt overwhelmed by the mounting crises, but then he felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down to see Lily, still wearing Elizabeth's helmet, her young face set with determination. "We can help, Mr. Maxwell," she said firmly. "The horses will listen to us. I know they will." Looking into her eyes so full of trust and courage, Maxwell felt a surge of strength. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. "You're right, Lily," he said, squeezing her hand. "Let's go." As they hurried out of the stable, neither of them noticed the shadowy figure watching from behind a nearby tree. The observer's eyes narrowed as they focused on the child wearing the old riding helmet. In one hand, they clutched a crumpled photograph. In the other, a small device that looked like a walkie-talkie crackled to life. "Boss," a gruff voice whispered. "You were right. The girl, she's here. And you're not going to believe who's looking after her." As Maxwell and Lily disappeared from view, the figure melted back into the shadows of the estate. The pieces of a long-dormant plan were falling into place, and soon, very soon, the true test would begin. The peaceful facade of Thornbury Manor was about to be shattered, and at the center of the storm stood a small girl in an old riding helmet, unaware of the forces converging around her, forces that threatened to tear apart the fragile new world she had only just begun to call home. The south pasture of Thornbury Manor was a scene of controlled chaos. Horses galloped freely across the verdant expanse, their manes flowing in the wind, while stable hands and ranch workers scrambled to corral them. Amidst the tumult, Maxwell and Lily stood side by side, surveying the situation. "This is worse than I thought," Maxwell muttered, his eyes scanning the horizon. Some of the horses had already made it to the edge of the property, dangerously close to the main road. Lily, still wearing Elizabeth's old riding helmet, squeezed Maxwell's hand. "Don't worry, Mr. Maxwell, we can do this." Her confidence, so at odds with her small stature, brought a smile to Maxwell's face despite the gravity of the situation. "All right, Lily. What do you suggest?" The girl closed her eyes for a moment, as if listening to a voice only she could hear. When she opened them, there was a certainty in her gaze that took Maxwell's breath away. "We need to call them," she said simply. "Not with our voices, but with our hearts. They're scared and confused. We need to show them the way home." Before Maxwell could question her cryptic words, Lily had slipped her hand from his and was walking purposefully towards the center of the pasture. She stopped, took a deep breath, and then did something that Maxwell would remember for the rest of his life. She began to hum. It wasn't a tune Maxwell recognized, but there was something hauntingly familiar about it. The melody seemed to carry on the wind, soft, yet somehow reaching every corner of the vast field. One by one, the horses began to still, their ears pricking towards the sound. Maxwell watched in awe as Lily slowly raised her arms, her small figure silhouetted against the morning sun. The humming grew stronger, and to his amazement the horses began to move, not in the frantic, chaotic patterns of before, but in a steady, almost hypnotic procession towards Lily. "It's incredible," Thomas breathed, appearing at Maxwell's side. "I've never seen anything like it." Maxwell could only nod, his throat tight with emotion. As he watched Lily guide the horses back towards their paddocks, with nothing more than her gentle humming and subtle gestures, he was struck by an overwhelming sense of déjà vu. Years ago, he had watched Elizabeth do something similar. It had been during a violent thunderstorm, and the horses had been panicked, threatening to break down their stalls. Elizabeth had walked into the stable, her voice raised in a soothing song, and like magic the horses had calmed. "She's so much like her," Maxwell whispered, more to himself than to Thomas. "Sir?" Thomas asked, confusion evident in his voice. Maxwell shook his head, realizing he'd spoken aloud. "Nothing, Thomas, just memories." As the last of the horses were safely returned to their enclosures, Lily turned back towards Maxwell, a triumphant smile lighting up her face. She ran to him, flinging her arms around his waist in an impulsive hug. "We did it, Mr. Maxwell. We did it." Maxwell found himself kneeling down, pulling Lily into a proper embrace. "No, Lily, you did it. That was amazing." Over Lily's shoulder, Maxwell caught sight of Mrs. Witherspoon standing at the edge of the pasture. The housekeeper's usual stern expression had softened, a look of wonder in her eyes as she watched the scene unfold. As Maxwell released Lily from the hug, he noticed something glinting in the grass nearby. Reaching down, he picked up a small metal object. His blood ran cold as he realized what it was, a bolt cutter. "Thomas," he said, his voice low and urgent, "I want the entire perimeter of the property checked, every fence, every gate, and double the night patrols. Whoever did this might still be around." Thomas nodded grimly, hurrying off to relay the orders. Maxwell pocketed the bolt cutter, his mind racing. The incident with the horses could have been disastrous. It was pure luck, or perhaps something more, that Lily had been there to help. But why? Why would someone want to release the horses? Was it merely vandalism, or was there a more sinister motive at play? As they walked back towards the house, Lily's small hand once again finding its way into Maxwell's, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He glanced over his shoulder, his eyes scanning the tree line at the edge of the property. For a moment he thought he saw a flash of movement, but when he looked again there was nothing there. "Mr. Maxwell," Lily's voice broke through his troubled thoughts. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, Lily. What is it?" The girl hesitated, biting her lip in a gesture that was achingly familiar. "The song I was humming, I'm not sure where I learned it, but it felt like I've known it forever. Does that make sense?" Maxwell's heart skipped a beat. Could it be possible? "Lily, that song, I think it might have been a lullaby, one that Elizabeth used to sing." Lily's eyes widened, a mix of confusion and something else, recognition perhaps, flickering across her face. "But how could I know it? I never met her, did I?" The question hung in the air between them, laden with implications that neither was quite ready to face. Maxwell opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Mrs. Witherspoon approached, her face grave. "Mr. Thornbury, there's a call for you. It's Charles. He says it's urgent." Maxwell nodded, giving Lily's hand a reassuring squeeze. "Why don't you go with Mrs. Witherspoon and get cleaned up? We'll talk more later, I promise." As Lily walked away with Mrs. Witherspoon, Maxwell couldn't help but notice how natural Elizabeth's old helmet looked on her, as if it had been made for her all along. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was both thrilling and terrifying. In his study, Maxwell picked up the phone, his hand shaking slightly. "Charles, what have you found?" His lawyer's voice crackled over the line, tense with suppressed excitement. "Max, you're not going to believe this. I've been digging into the records surrounding the Hartley fire, and I found something. Something big." Maxwell sank into his chair, bracing himself. "Tell me." "There was a witness, Max. Someone who saw what really happened that night. And they're still alive." As Charles continued to speak, laying out the details of his discovery, Maxwell felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. The truth about that fateful night 7 years ago, the truth about Lily's origins, it was all within reach. But as he listened, a chill ran down his spine. If he and Charles were putting the pieces together, others might be too. The incidents at the estate, the mysterious figure Lily sometimes spoke of in her nightmares, it all pointed to a sinister conclusion. Someone out there knew the truth about Lily, and they would stop at nothing to keep that truth buried. As the autumn sun began to set over Thornbury Manor, casting long shadows across the now peaceful pastures, Maxwell made a silent vow. He would uncover the truth no matter the cost. For Lily's sake, for Elizabeth's memory, and for the chance at the family he had thought lost forever. The game was afoot, and the stakes were higher than Maxwell could have ever imagined. Little did he know that the next few days would test him in ways he never thought possible, forcing him to confront not only the ghosts of his past, but also the very real dangers lurking in the present. As night fell over the estate, a lone figure stood at the edge of the property, watching the lights come on in the main house. In one hand they held a photograph of a young woman with a striking resemblance to Lily. In the other, a phone buzzed insistently. "Yes," the figure answered, their voice barely above a whisper. "I understand. It's time to move to the next phase. The girl and Thornbury. They won't know what hit them." With one last look at the serene manor house, the figure melted into the darkness, leaving behind only the faintest rustle of leaves and the lingering sense that the peace of Thornbury Manor was about to be shattered forever. The following morning dawned grey and misty over Thornbury Manor, the landscape shrouded in a veil that seemed to mirror the secrets and uncertainties swirling around its inhabitants. Maxwell sat in his study, a cup of untouched coffee growing cold on the desk before him, as he pored over the documents Charles had sent over. The witness Charles had uncovered was a former stable hand from the Hartley estate. According to the police reports from the night of the fire, the man had been dismissed as unreliable due to his apparent state of intoxication. But Charles had tracked him down, and his story, told 7 years later with a clear mind and heavy conscience, painted a very different picture of that fateful night. A soft knock at the door interrupted Maxwell's thoughts. "Come in," he called, hastily shuffling the papers into a folder. Mrs. Witherspoon entered, her usual stern expression softened by concern. "Sir, I thought you should know. Lily is out in the stables again. She seems unsettled this morning." Maxwell nodded, rubbing his tired eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Witherspoon. I'll go check on her." As he made his way across the dew-laden lawn towards the stables, Maxwell couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over him since his conversation with Charles. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to come together, but the picture they formed was more complex and disturbing than he had imagined. He found Lily in Stardust's stall, her small arms wrapped around the mare's neck, her face buried in the horse's mane. As he approached, he could hear her whispering softly to the animal. "Lily," he called gently, not wanting to startle her. The girl turned, and Maxwell was struck by the mixture of emotions playing across her young face: fear, confusion, and something that looked almost like recognition. "Mr. Maxwell," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I had a dream last night about the lady in the picture, Elizabeth. She was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear her. There was too much noise, too much fire." Maxwell's heart clenched. He knelt down beside Lily, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Lily, there's something I need to tell you, something about Elizabeth and about you." But before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats interrupted them. Thomas appeared at the stable entrance, his face flushed with exertion. "Mr. Thornbury, there's a car coming up the drive. It's the police, sir." Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine. "Stay here with Lily," he instructed Thomas before turning back to the girl. "Lily, I promise we'll talk more later. For now, I need you to stay here with Thomas and Stardust. Can you do that for me?" Lily nodded, her eyes wide with concern. As Maxwell hurried back towards the house, he could feel her gaze boring into his back, filled with questions he wasn't sure he was ready to answer. At the front of the manor, 2 police cars had pulled up, their lights flashing silently in the misty morning air. A tall, severe-looking woman in a detective's uniform approached as Maxwell reached the entrance. "Mr. Thornbury?" she inquired, her voice clipped and professional. "I'm Detective Sarah Hawthorne. We need to ask you some questions about a child in your care." Maxwell's mind raced. How had they found out about Lily so quickly? And more importantly, what did they know? "Of course, Detective," he replied, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Please come inside." As he led Detective Hawthorne and her partner into his study, Maxwell caught sight of Mrs. Witherspoon hovering anxiously in the hallway. He gave her a reassuring nod, silently communicating that she should keep an eye on Lily. Once inside the study, Detective Hawthorne wasted no time getting to the point. "Mr. Thornbury, it's come to our attention that you've recently taken in a young girl, a girl with no apparent guardians or documentation. Can you explain the circumstances of her arrival?" Maxwell took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "The child, Lily, was found on my property about a week ago. She was alone and in need of medical attention. I've been trying to uncover her background ever since." Detective Hawthorne's partner, a younger man with kind eyes, spoke up. "And you didn't think to report this to the authorities immediately?" I wanted to be sure of the facts before involving officials," Maxwell replied, aware of how weak the excuse sounded even to his own ears. Detective Hawthorne's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Thornbury, are you aware that there's an open missing persons case from 7 years ago that bears striking similarities to this child?" Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face. This was it, the moment when the past and present collided. But before he could formulate a response, a commotion outside caught their attention. Mrs. Witherspoon's voice, uncharacteristically panicked, rang out. "Mr. Thornbury, come quickly. It's Lily, she's gone." The next few minutes were a blur of activity. Maxwell, the detectives, and the house staff spread out across the property, calling Lily's name. But as the search stretched on with no sign of the girl, a horrifying realization began to dawn on Maxwell. This wasn't a simple case of a child wandering off. The mysterious figure who had been watching the estate, the incidents with the fences and horses, it had all been leading to this moment. Lily hadn't run away. She had been taken. As the police called for backup and began to set up a proper search operation, Maxwell found himself back in the stables, staring at Stardust's empty stall. On the ground, half hidden in the straw, lay Elizabeth's old riding helmet, the one Lily had been wearing just yesterday. Maxwell picked it up, his hands shaking. As he turned it over, something fluttered to the ground. A small piece of paper, folded and creased. With a growing sense of dread, he unfolded it. The message, written in a hand he didn't recognize, sent a chill through his very soul. "The truth will cost you everything." Again. As the sounds of the search party faded into the background, Maxwell clutched the helmet to his chest, a storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm him. He had failed to protect Lily, just as he had failed to protect his family 7 years ago. But this time would be different. This time he wouldn't rest until he uncovered the truth and brought Lily home, no matter the cost. Little did Maxwell know that the journey ahead would test him in ways he could never have imagined, forcing him to confront not only the ghosts of his past, but also the very real and dangerous forces that sought to keep the truth buried forever. As the mist began to lift over Thornbury Manor, revealing a landscape forever changed by the morning's events, Maxwell Thornbury steeled himself for the battle ahead. The game was no longer just about uncovering the past, it was about saving the future. And he was determined to win for Lily's sake and for the chance to finally put right the wrongs of 7 long years ago. The hours following Lily's disappearance passed in a blur of police interviews, search parties, and mounting tension. Thornbury Manor, once a haven of tranquility, had been transformed into a hive of frantic activity. As night fell, casting long shadows across the now empty paddocks, Maxwell found himself standing alone in Lily's room, surrounded by the soft toys and colorful drawings that served as poignant reminders of the child who had so quickly become the heart of the household. A gentle knock at the door roused him from his thoughts. Mrs. Witherspoon entered, her usually impeccable appearance slightly disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed from worry and lack of sleep. "Mr. Thornbury," she began, her voice uncharacteristically gentle. "Detective Hawthorne would like a word. She says it's important." Maxwell nodded, steeling himself for another round of questioning. As he made his way down to his study, where the detective waited, he couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Every moment Lily spent away from the safety of Thornbury Manor was a moment she was in danger. Detective Hawthorne stood as Maxwell entered, her face a mask of professional concern. "Mr. Thornbury, I think it's time we laid all our cards on the table. My team has been doing some digging and we've uncovered some concerning information." Maxwell sank into his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 55 years. "Go on," he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and worry. 7 years ago, Hawthorne began, there was a fire at the Hartley estate. A child was reported missing in the aftermath, a child that matches Lily's description. But here's where it gets interesting. That child was registered as the daughter of Elizabeth Thornbury, your wife. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Maxwell closed his eyes, the weight of secrets long kept threatening to crush him. "Yes," he finally said, opening his eyes to meet Hawthorne's steady gaze. "Lily is my daughter." Over the next hour, Maxwell poured out the whole story, Elizabeth's secret pregnancy, the fears that had driven them to hide their child, the tragic night of the fire, and the years of guilt and searching that had followed. As he spoke, he could see the detective's expression shifting from suspicion to something closer to sympathy. "Mr. Thornbury," Hawthorne said when he had finished, "I understand why you kept this information to yourself, but you must realize that by doing so, you may have put Lily in even greater danger." "What do you mean?" Maxwell asked, a chill running down his spine. Hawthorne pulled out a file spreading several photographs across the desk. "We've been tracking a group of individuals involved in a complex web of fraud, blackmail, and child trafficking. Your family's story, the hidden pregnancy, the fire, the missing child, it all fits a pattern we've seen before." Maxwell felt the blood drain from his face as he looked at the photos. Grainy surveillance images showed shadowy figures, their faces obscured, but one detail stood out, a distinctive signet ring worn by one of the men. "This ring," Maxwell whispered, recognition dawning. "I've seen it before. The night of the fire, there was a man. I thought he was there to help, but now—" Hawthorne nodded grimly. "We believe this group has been operating for years, exploiting wealthy families with secrets to hide. They create situations, like the fire at the Hartley estate, that allow them to separate children from their families, only to return them years later in exchange for massive ransoms. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture more horrifying than Maxwell could have imagined. And you think they've taken Lily now to complete the cycle? It's a possibility we have to consider," Hawthorne confirmed. "But Mr. Thornbury, this is also our best chance to bring this group down once and for all. With your help, we might be able to save not just Lily, but other children who have fallen victim to this scheme." As the detective laid out her plan, Maxwell felt a renewed sense of purpose flooding through him. They would use his resources, his connections, to set a trap for Lily's kidnappers. It was dangerous, yes, but it was also their best hope of bringing her home safely. Just as Hawthorne was preparing to leave, Mrs. Witherspoon burst into the study, her face pale with shock. "Mr. Thornbury, come quickly. It's Stardust. She's gone wild." Racing to the stables, Maxwell and Hawthorne found a scene of chaos. The normally gentle Stardust was rearing and bucking in her stall, her eyes wide with fear or fury. As they watched, amazed, the mare somehow managed to unlatch her stall door, bursting out into the stable aisle. "She's never acted like this," Thomas exclaimed, struggling to approach the agitated horse. "It's like she's possessed." But Maxwell, watching Stardust's frantic movements, felt a spark of hope ignite in his chest. "No," he said softly. "She's trying to tell us something. Lily always said she could understand what the horses were feeling." As if in response to her name, Stardust whinnied loudly, turning to face the open stable doors. Without warning, she bolted, galloping out into the night. "Follow that horse!" Hawthorne shouted, already sprinting towards her car. What followed was a wild chase through the moonlit countryside, with Stardust leading the way, as if guided by some unseen force. Maxwell, riding in Hawthorne's police car, felt his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. Was this mad dash really leading them to Lily? Or was it just the desperate fantasy of a grieving father? After what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, Stardust finally slowed, approaching an old abandoned farmhouse set back from the road. As they cautiously approached, Maxwell could make out a flickering light in one of the windows, and a small silhouette that made his heart leap. "Lily!" he cried out, all thoughts of caution forgotten as he raced towards the house. But before he could reach the door, a sharp crack split the air and Maxwell felt a searing pain in his shoulder. As he stumbled, he caught a glimpse of a figure emerging from the shadows, a gun glinting in the moonlight. "Not another step, Thornbury," a cold voice commanded, "or the next bullet won't miss." As Maxwell fell to his knees, clutching his wounded shoulder, he looked up to see a face he had hoped never to see again, the man with the signet ring, the one he had encountered on the night of the fire 7 years ago. "You!" Maxwell gasped, as Detective Hawthorne and her team surrounded the area, their own weapons drawn. The man smiled, a cold, cruel expression that sent chills down Maxwell's spine. "Did you really think we'd let you unravel everything we've worked so hard to build? Your precious Lily was just the beginning, Thornbury. But now I'm afraid it's time for this little family reunion to come to an end." As the standoff intensified, with Lily's fate hanging in the balance, Maxwell realized that the final confrontation he had been dreading for 7 years was about to unfold. The truth about that fateful night, about Lily's disappearance and miraculous return, was finally within reach. But at what cost? As he looked at the cold eyes of the man holding the gun, Maxwell knew that the answer to that question would determine not just his own fate, but the fate of his daughter and the future of Thornbury Manor itself. One such moment came on a warm afternoon, about a week after their return home. Maxwell found Lily in the stables, softly singing to Stardust as she brushed the mare's gleaming coat. "You're good at that," Maxwell said gently, not wanting to startle her. Lily turned, a small smile lighting up her face. "Stardust likes it. She says it reminds her of before, of Mom." The casual mention of Elizabeth sent a pang through Maxwell's heart, but it was tempered by a bittersweet joy. "Your mother loved horses," he said, moving to stand beside Lily. "She had a way with them, just like you do." Lily was quiet for a moment, her small hands still moving the brush in smooth strokes along Stardust's flank. "Dad?" she finally asked, her voice hesitant. "Will you tell me about her? About what happened?" Maxwell took a deep breath. He had known this moment would come, had prepared for it, but the reality of it still made his heart race. Slowly he lowered himself onto a hay bale, patting the space beside him. Lily came to sit, her eyes wide and expectant. "Your mother, Elizabeth, was the most beautiful, kind, and brave woman I've ever known," Maxwell began, his voice thick with emotion. "When we found out we were going to have you, we were overjoyed, but there were complications." Over the next hour, as the afternoon sun slanted through the stable windows, Maxwell shared the story of Lily's birth, of the fears and threats that had led them to hide her away, and of the tragic night of the fire that had torn their family apart. He spoke of the years of searching, of hope fading and then rekindling with Lily's mysterious appearance at Thornbury Manor. Lily listened intently, her small face a canvas of emotions, confusion, sadness, and flickers of recognition. When Maxwell finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I remember some of it," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not clearly, but feelings. Being scared but knowing I was loved. And horses, always horses." Maxwell pulled her close with his good arm, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "You were always loved, Lily. Always. And you always will be." As they sat there, the comfortable silence broken only by Stardust's occasional soft nickering, Maxwell marveled at the strength of the small girl beside him. She had endured so much, lost so much, and yet here she was, still able to love and trust. Their moment of peace was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Witherspoon, her usually stern face softened with affection as she regarded the pair. "Mr. Thornbury, Miss Lily," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "There's someone here to see you. Says it's quite urgent." Maxwell felt a flicker of apprehension, but Lily's hand slipping into his gave him courage. Together they made their way back to the house, where they found Agent Blackwood waiting in the study. "Mr. Thornbury, Lily," the agent greeted them, her tone serious but not unkind. "I have some news that I think you'll want to hear." Over the next half hour, Agent Blackwood laid out the fruits of the FBI's investigation. The network that had taken Lily was indeed extensive, reaching into the highest echelons of society. But with the evidence gathered from Thornbury Manor and the subsequent arrests, it was crumbling. "We've identified several other children who were taken under similar circumstances," Blackwood explained. "Thanks to you both, we're in the process of reuniting them with their families." The news hit Maxwell like a physical force. The idea that their ordeal, painful as it had been, had led to other families being made whole. It was almost too much to comprehend. Lily, who had been quiet throughout the explanation, suddenly spoke up. "The other kids," she said, her voice small but determined. "Can we help them? They must be scared like I was." Maxwell and Agent Blackwood exchanged a look of surprise and admiration. That's very kind of you, Lily," Blackwood said. "I think there might be a way you can help, actually. Your story, your bravery, it could inspire other children who are going through similar situations." As they discussed the possibilities, support groups, counseling programs, even a foundation to help families affected by trafficking, Maxwell felt a surge of pride so strong it brought tears to his eyes. His daughter, who had every right to be angry at the world, was instead looking for ways to help others. Later that evening, as the sun set over Thornbury Manor, Maxwell and Lily stood on the balcony overlooking the estate. The paddocks were filled with horses, their coats gleaming in the fading light. "What happens now, Dad?" Lily asked, her small hand still firmly clasped in Maxwell's. Maxwell looked down at her, seeing in her eyes a mixture of hope and uncertainty that mirrored his own feelings. "Now," he said softly, "we heal, we learn to be a family again, and we use what we've been through to help others." Lily nodded solemnly, then broke into a smile that lit up her whole face. "Can we start by helping the horses? Stardust says some of them are still sad about everything that happened." Maxwell chuckled, marveling once again at his daughter's resilience and compassion. "Of course we can, sweetheart. In fact, I think that's a wonderful place to start." As they turned to head back inside, Maxwell paused for one last look at the sunset. The shadows of the past still lingered, but they were being steadily pushed back by the light of a new day, a new beginning. Thornbury Manor, once a lonely monument to loss and regret, was transforming. With every laugh, every tender moment between father and daughter, it was becoming something it had always been meant to be. A true home, filled with love, hope, and the promise of a brighter future. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be challenges to face, wounds still to heal. But as Maxwell felt Lily's small hand in his, he knew with unshakable certainty that they would face whatever came next together. For the first time in 7 long years, Maxwell Thornbury looked to the future not with dread, but with hope. The mystery that had brought Lily back into his life had been solved, but the greatest adventure, that of being a father, of watching his daughter grow and thrive, was only just beginning. And as the last light of day faded, giving way to a sky filled with stars, Maxwell made a silent promise to Elizabeth, wherever she might be. He would love and protect their daughter with every fiber of his being. He would ensure that Lily grew up knowing not just the tragedy of her past, but the limitless potential of her future. Together, they would write a new chapter in the story of Thornbury Manor, one of healing, of second chances, and of a love strong enough to overcome even the darkest of secrets. The soft golden light of early autumn filtered through the curtains of Lily's room at Thornbury Manor, gently rousing the young girl from her slumber. For a moment, as consciousness slowly returned, a flicker of fear passed through her, a residual effect of her ordeal. But then she felt the warm weight of a small puppy curled up at her feet, and reality settled in. She was home. She was safe. The puppy, a fluffy golden retriever named Sunshine, had been a gift from Maxwell a few weeks after their return. "Every little girl should have a loyal friend," he had said, his eyes twinkling with a mix of love and lingering sadness. Sunshine had quickly become Lily's constant companion, a source of comfort during the night when memories threatened to overwhelm her. As Lily stretched and sat up, a gentle knock sounded at her door. "Come in," she called, her voice still a bit groggy from sleep. Maxwell entered, a warm smile on his face. "Good morning, sweetheart. Ready for your big day?" Lily nodded, excitement and nervousness warring in her stomach. Today was her first day of school. Real school, not the homeschooling she'd been doing with tutors over the past few months as she adjusted to her new life. As she got dressed in her new school uniform, Lily couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. The nightmares that had once plagued her nightly now came less frequently. She was learning to trust, to open up, not just to Maxwell but to others as well. Mrs. Witherspoon, once so stern, had become a warm, grandmotherly presence in her life, and her sessions with Dr. Harriet, the kind child psychologist who specialized in trauma, were helping her make sense of her experiences and emotions. Downstairs, Maxwell waited at the breakfast table, a spread of Lily's favorite foods laid out before him. As Lily took her seat, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the resilience of his daughter. She had been through so much, yet here she was, facing each new day with courage and, increasingly, with joy. "Nervous?" he asked gently, passing her a glass of orange juice. Lily nodded, biting her lip. "A little," she admitted. What if the other kids don't like me? What if they think I'm weird because of, everything?" Maxwell reached across the table, taking Lily's small hand in his. "Lily, my brave girl, listen to me. You are extraordinary, not weird. You've been through things no child should ever have to experience, and you've come out stronger for it. The other children might not understand everything, but they will see your kindness, your intelligence, and your beautiful spirit. Just be yourself, and the right friends will find you." Lily smiled, squeezing her father's hand. "Thanks, Dad," she said softly. As they drove to the school, Lily's nerves began to calm. She thought about the other children she'd met through the support group for kids who had been through similar experiences. They had become like a second family to her, understanding her in ways even Maxwell sometimes couldn't. Maybe, she thought, she could be that kind of friend to someone at her new school. At the school gates, Maxwell knelt down to Lily's level, straightening her collar in a gesture that was becoming beautifully familiar. "Remember," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I'm so proud of you. No matter what happens today, I'll be right here waiting when you get out. And tonight we'll go for a ride with Stardust to celebrate, okay?" Lily nodded, then threw her arms around Maxwell's neck in a fierce hug. "I love you, Dad," she whispered. "I love you too, sweetheart, more than you could ever know." As Lily walked through the school gates, her head held high, Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. His little girl, so brave, so strong. He watched until she disappeared into the building, then turned back to his car, wiping a stray tear from his cheek. The day stretched long for Maxwell. He tried to focus on work. The Thornbury Foundation, set up to help families affected by child trafficking, demanded much of his attention these days. But his thoughts kept drifting to Lily. Was she making friends? Was she happy? When the final bell rang, Maxwell was already waiting at the gates. His heart soared as he saw Lily emerge, chatting animatedly with two other girls. Her face lit up as she spotted him, and she ran over, her backpack bouncing. "Dad! Dad!" she called, excitement evident in her voice. "I made friends. This is Emma and Sophia. Can they come over sometime to see the horses?" Maxwell grinned, relief and joy washing over him. "Of course they can," he said, nodding politely to the other girls and their waiting parents. "How about this weekend?" As they drove home, Lily chattered happily about her day, her nice teacher, the interesting books in the library, the funny thing that happened at lunch. Maxwell listened, his heart full. This was what he had dreamed of during those long, dark years, the simple, beautiful normalcy of a child excited about school. That evening, as promised, they went for a ride. Lily on Stardust, Maxwell on his own horse, Thunder. As they cantered across the fields of Thornbury Manor, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Maxwell felt a sense of peace he hadn't known in years. They had a long way to go, he knew. There would be challenges ahead. Legal battles as the case against Lily's kidnappers progressed, emotional hurdles as Lily continued to process her experiences, the ongoing work of the foundation. But in this moment, watching his daughter laugh as she urged Stardust into a gallop, her hair streaming behind her like a banner of hope, Maxwell knew that they would face whatever came next together. As night fell and the first stars began to twinkle in the sky, father and daughter made their way back to the stables. Lily, sleepy but content, leaned against Maxwell as they walked. "Dad?" she said softly. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm glad I found my way home." Maxwell swallowed hard, blinking back tears. "Me too, Lily. Me too." As they reached the manor, its windows glowing with warm light, Maxwell scooped Lily up into his arms, ignoring the twinge in his healing shoulder. She was getting almost too big for this, but neither of them was quite ready to let go of these moments. Together, they stepped into their home, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. For now they had this: love, family, and the promise of new beginnings. And for Maxwell and Lily Thornbury, that was more than enough. As they walked away from the scene of their final confrontation, the first chapter of their new life together was already beginning to unfold. And though the shadows of the past still lingered, the bright promise of the future shone even brighter. Thornbury Manor awaited, no longer a lonely monument to loss and secrets, but a home ready to be filled with love, laughter, and the joy of a family reunited against all odds. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke as Maxwell Thornbury made his way across the grounds of the estate. It had been 6 months since Lily's return, 6 months of healing, learning, and rebuilding. The changes were evident everywhere he looked, from the increased security measures that now blended seamlessly with the pastoral beauty of Thornbury Manor, to the sound of children's laughter drifting from the newly established community centre near the stables. Maxwell paused at the paddock fence, watching as Lily led a small group of children in a riding lesson. The Thornbury Foundation's equine therapy program had been her idea, born from her own experiences of finding solace and strength through her connection with horses. Seeing her now confidently guiding a young boy as he tentatively patted a gentle pony, Maxwell felt a swell of pride so intense it nearly took his breath away. "She's a natural teacher," a familiar voice said from beside him. Maxwell turned to see Detective Sarah Hawthorne, now a close friend and advisor to the Foundation, approaching with a smile. "She is," Maxwell agreed, his voice warm with affection. "Some days I can hardly believe how far she's come." Sarah nodded, her expression turning serious. "That's actually why I'm here, Max. We've had a breakthrough in the case. I thought you should know before the news breaks." Maxwell felt a chill run down his spine, one that had nothing to do with the autumn breeze. "What kind of breakthrough?" "We found Elizabeth's journal," Sarah said softly, her eyes full of sympathy. "The real one, not the fabricated version that was planted after her disappearance. It explains everything, Max. Why she felt she had to hide Lily, who was behind the threats, all of it." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Maxwell gripped the fence for support, his mind reeling. "Where?" he managed to ask. "How?" "It was hidden in a safety deposit box under an alias. The key was in the possession of one of the lower-level members of the trafficking ring we arrested. He finally cracked and told us where to find it." Maxwell closed his eyes, memories of Elizabeth washing over him. Her laugh, the scent of her perfume, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about their future. When he opened them again, he saw Lily looking his way, concern evident on her young face even from a distance. He managed a reassuring smile and a small wave. "Does Lily know you're here?" he asked Sarah. The detective shook her head. "I came straight to you. I thought you should be the one to decide how to handle this." Maxwell nodded, gratitude mixing with the tumult of emotions churning inside him. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." As Sarah took her leave, promising to return later with the journal and more details, Maxwell made his way to the stables. Lily, having sensed something was amiss, had already wrapped up her lesson and was leading her young students back to their waiting parents. "Dad," she called as she approached, her brow furrowed with concern. "Is everything okay?" Maxwell knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with his daughter. Even now it struck him how much she looked like Elizabeth, the same determined set of her jaw, the same compassionate eyes. "Lily, sweetheart, there's something we need to talk about. Something about your mom." Lily's eyes widened, a mix of emotions flickering across her face. Hope, fear, curiosity. "What is it? Did they find her?" "No, not exactly," Maxwell said gently. "But they found something she left behind. Something that might help us understand what happened all those years ago." As they made their way back to the house, Maxwell explained about the journal in terms Lily could understand. They had always been honest with each other, a pact made in those first difficult days after her return. No more secrets, they had promised, No more hidden truths. In Maxwell's study, with sunshine, the puppy curled at their feet, and a fire crackling in the hearth to ward off the autumn chill, father and daughter sat side by side on the old leather sofa. Sarah had delivered the journal as promised, and now it sat on the coffee table before them, its worn cover a silent testament to the secrets it held. "Are you ready?" Maxwell asked softly, his hand hovering over the journal. Lily nodded, her small hand slipping into his. "Together," she said, her voice small but determined. As Maxwell began to read aloud, Elizabeth's words painting a vivid picture of love, fear, and desperate choices, Lily listened intently. There were moments when Maxwell had to pause, his voice choked with emotion. In those moments, it was Lily who squeezed his hand, offering comfort, even as she processed her own complex feelings. The journal revealed a tale more intricate and heartbreaking than either of them had imagined. Elizabeth had uncovered a plot within her own family, a generations-old secret society dedicated to maintaining power and wealth through any means necessary, including the exploitation of children. Her pregnancy with Lily had been the catalyst, the moment she decided she could no longer be part of such a legacy. "She was trying to protect you," Maxwell said softly as he closed the journal hours later. "Everything she did, every choice she made, it was all for you." Lily was quiet for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "She loved me, she really loved me." "Oh, Lily," Maxwell pulled her into a tight embrace. "She loved you more than anything. In this world, and so do I." As they held each other, the weight of the past finally lifting, a soft whinny drifted through the open window. Stardust, as if sensing the emotional moment, was calling out to them. Lily pulled back, wiping her eyes. A small, determined smile played at the corners of her mouth. "Dad, can we go for a ride? I think Mum would like that." Maxwell nodded, his own eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I think you're right, sweetheart. I think she'd like that very much." As they made their way to the stables, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Maxwell felt a sense of peace settle over him. The journal had answered so many questions, had filled in the gaps of a story too painful to fully remember, but it had also reaffirmed what he had always known in his heart, that love, true and deep, could overcome even the darkest of circumstances. Mounting their horses, Maxwell and Lily set off across the fields of Thornbury Manor. As they rode side by side, Maxwell couldn't help but feel that Elizabeth was with them somehow, her spirit carried on the autumn breeze. The road ahead would still have its challenges. There would be legal battles to face as they worked to bring the remaining members of the secret society to justice. There would be difficult conversations as Lily continued to process her past and shape her future. But in this moment, watching his daughter ride with confidence and grace, her face tilted up to the fading sunlight, Maxwell knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be. Thornbury Manor, once a symbol of loss and loneliness, now stood as a beacon of hope, a place of new beginnings, of healing, of family. And as night fell, stars twinkling into existence above them, Maxwell made a silent promise to Elizabeth, to Lily, and to himself. They would honor the past, cherish the present, and face the future together, bound by a love that had overcome the greatest of odds, a love that would continue to light their way, no matter what challenges lay ahead. The grand ballroom of Thornbury Manor, once a silent testament to a more opulent era, now buzzed with activity. Banners bearing the Thornbury Foundation logo adorned the walls, and the air was filled with the excited chatter of volunteers, social workers, and families. At the center of it all stood Lily Thornbury, now 12 years old, her eyes shining with purpose as she addressed the gathered crowd. "Welcome, everyone, to the first annual Thornbury Foundation Family Reunion," she began, her voice clear and confident. "Each of you here today has a story, a journey that brought you to this moment. Some of those stories are painful, some are hopeful, but all of them are important. Today we celebrate how far we've come, and we look forward to the future we're building together." From the back of the room, Maxwell watched his daughter with a mixture of pride and awe. The past 2 years had seen Lily blossom from a traumatized child into a passionate advocate for other children who had been through similar ordeals. The foundation, originally created to help families affected by child trafficking, had expanded its mission under Lily's influence, now offering a wide range of support services and educational programs. As Lily continued her speech, Maxwell's mind drifted back to the day nearly a year ago when she had first proposed the idea of this reunion. "Dad," she had said, her face serious as they sat in his study one evening, "I've been thinking. The foundation is doing great work, but I feel like we're missing something." "What's that, sweetheart?" Maxwell had asked, intrigued by the determination in her voice. "Connection," Lily had replied. "All these families we're helping, they're going through the same things we did. The fear, the confusion, the struggle to trust again. What if we brought them all together? Not just for therapy or legal help, but to really connect with each other." The idea had taken root, growing into this moment. A weekend-long event designed to bring together families who had been touched by the Foundation's work, offering workshops, support groups, and most importantly, a chance to build a community. As Lily concluded her speech to enthusiastic applause, Maxwell made his way through the crowd to join her on the small stage. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders, giving her a gentle squeeze. "That was wonderful, Lily," he said softly. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Lily beamed up at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Thanks, Dad. I just hope we can really make a difference, you know?" Before Maxwell could respond, they were approached by a woman holding the hand of a young boy who looked to be about 8 or 9. The woman's eyes were red-rimmed, but she wore a smile of genuine gratitude. "Miss Lily, Mr. Thornbury," she began, her voice wavering slightly, "I just wanted to thank you both. My son, Tommy. He hasn't spoken a word since we got him back 6 months ago. But listening to your story, Lily, and being here today, he asked me if he could pet the horses. It's the first thing he's said in months." Lily knelt down to Tommy's level, her smile warm and understanding. "Hi, Tommy, I know exactly how you feel. It's scary to talk sometimes, isn't it? But you know what? The horses are great listeners. Would you like me to introduce you to my special friend, Stardust?" Tommy nodded shyly, the ghost of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. As Lily led the boy and his mother towards the stables, Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. This was why they did this work, why they had opened their home and their hearts to others who had suffered. Every small victory, every moment of connection, was a step towards healing, not just for the individuals involved, but for the wider community. The rest of the day passed in a blur of emotional moments and small breakthroughs. Maxwell found himself sharing his own experiences with a group of parents, offering hope and guidance as they navigated the complex process of helping their children heal. He watched as Lily led group activities for the younger children, her natural empathy and understanding creating an environment where even the most traumatized kids felt safe enough to play and laugh. As evening fell, the event moved outdoors. Fairy lights twinkled in the trees surrounding the manor, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Families mingled, sharing stories and forming connections that Maxwell knew would last long beyond this weekend. Standing on the terrace, overlooking the scene, Maxwell felt a presence beside him. He turned to see Detective, now Chief, Sarah Hawthorne, a glass of lemonade in her hand and a smile on her face. "You've done something remarkable here, Max," she said, gesturing to the happy crowd below. "When I think back to that scared little girl we found in the farmhouse and then look at Lily now, it's almost hard to believe." Maxwell nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "She amazes me every day," he said softly. "Her strength, her compassion. Sometimes I think she's the one who saved me, not the other way around." Sarah placed a comforting hand on his arm. "You saved each other," she said firmly, "and now you're saving others. The work you're doing here, the lives you're touching, it's creating ripples that will be felt for generations." As if on cue, a peal of laughter rose from the crowd below. Maxwell spotted Lily, surrounded by a group of children, animatedly telling a story. Her face was alight with joy, and for a moment, Maxwell could have sworn he saw a flicker of Elizabeth in her smile. "You're right," he said to Sarah, his voice filled with quiet determination. "And we're just getting started." As the night wore on and families began to say their goodbyes, Maxwell found Lily sitting on a hay bale near the stables, Sunshine the dog faithfully at her feet. She looked tired but content, her eyes reflecting the starry sky above. "Hey, sweetheart," Maxwell said, sitting down beside her. "How are you feeling?" Lily leaned her head on his shoulder, a gesture that never failed to warm his heart. "Happy," she said simply, "and I don't know. Like we're part of something bigger, you know? Maxwell nodded, wrapping an arm around her. I do know. And I couldn't be more proud of you, Lily. You've taken everything you've been through and turned it into something beautiful, something that's helping so many people. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the distant sounds of laughter and conversation drifting from the manor. Then Lily spoke, her voice soft but determined. Dad, I've been thinking about the future, about what I want to do when I grow up. Oh? Maxwell said, curious. And what's that? Lily sat up straight, her eyes shining with purpose. I want to be a child psychologist, like Dr. Harriet, and I want to expand the foundation, maybe open centers like this in other places. There are so many kids out there who need help, who need to know they're not alone. Maxwell felt a swell of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. This remarkable girl, his daughter, had taken the darkest chapter of her life and was determined to use it to bring light to others. In that moment, he saw not just the child she was, but the incredible woman she was becoming. I think that's a wonderful idea, Lily, he said, his voice thick with pride, and I'll be right here to support you every step of the way. As they made their way back to the manor, the first hints of dawn lightening the eastern sky, Maxwell reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. There had been so much pain, so much loss, but there had also been love, resilience, and now hope, not just for themselves, but for all the lives they were touching through their work. Thornbury Manor, once a symbol of isolation and secrets, now stood as a beacon of healing and new beginnings. And as Maxwell watched Lily climb the stairs to her room, tired but happy after the long day, he knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for them, but for all the families whose lives they had touched and all those they had yet to reach. The future, once so uncertain, now stretched before them, full of promise and purpose. And Maxwell Thornbury, with his remarkable daughter by his side, was ready to face whatever challenges it might bring, knowing that together they could overcome anything. The years seemed to fly by in a whirlwind of growth, change, and purpose. Before Maxwell knew it, Lily was 18, standing on the cusp of adulthood, her eyes bright with the promise of the future. It was a warm summer evening, and they were once again in Maxwell's study, a room that had seen so many pivotal moments in their journey together. Dad, Lily began, her voice a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I got the letter from the university today. Maxwell felt his heart skip a beat. They had been waiting for this moment for weeks, the anticipation building with each passing day. And? He prompted gently, though he could already guess the answer from the barely contained smile on Lily's face. I got in, she exclaimed, her composure finally breaking as she launched herself into Maxwell's arms. Full scholarship to study psychology, with a focus on trauma and resilience in children. Maxwell held his daughter tight, feeling a complex swirl of emotions, pride, joy, and a touch of bittersweet nostalgia. It seemed like only yesterday that he had held a frightened 7-year-old in his arms, vowing to protect her from the world. Now that same girl was preparing to go out into the world, armed with her experiences and determined to make a difference. I'm so proud of you, Lily, Maxwell said, his voice thick with emotion. So incredibly proud. Your mother would be too. At the mention of Elizabeth, Lily's eyes softened. Over the years, they had worked together to keep Elizabeth's memory alive, to honor the sacrifices she had made. The journal they had discovered all those years ago had become a treasured family heirloom, a link to the past that had shaped their present. I was thinking, Lily said, settling into the comfortable leather chair across from Maxwell's desk, about the foundation, about how we can expand its reach even further. Maxwell leaned forward, intrigued. Lily's passion for the Thornbury Foundation's work had only grown stronger over the years. Under her influence, they had already established satellite centers in 3 other states, offering support and resources to families affected by trauma and exploitation. What did you have in mind? He asked. Lily's eyes lit up with that familiar spark of determination. I want to create a scholarship program, she explained, for other kids like me who've been through trauma but want to turn their experiences into something positive. We could fund their education in fields like psychology, social work, law, anything that could help them make a difference. Maxwell felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly took his breath away. This was Lily's gift, the ability to take the darkest parts of her past and transform them into beacons of hope for others. "That's a wonderful idea," he said warmly. "We'll start working on it right away. In fact," he paused, a thought occurring to him, "why don't we announce it at your graduation party? It could be a sort of launch for the next phase of the Foundation's work." Lily's face broke into a radiant smile. "That's perfect, Dad. Oh, this is going to be amazing. Just think of all the lives we could change." As they spent the next hour excitedly planning the details of the new scholarship program, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the young woman his daughter had become. She had taken every challenge life had thrown at her and turned it into an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to help others. The day of Lily's graduation party arrived, bringing with it a sense of celebration and new beginnings. Thornbury Manor was once again filled with friends, family, and supporters of the Foundation's work. The grand ballroom had been transformed, with congratulatory banners mingling with displays showcasing the Foundation's achievements over the years. As Maxwell stood at the podium, preparing to make the announcement about the new scholarship program, he caught Lily's eye in the crowd. She gave him an encouraging nod, her face beaming with pride and excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen," Maxwell began, his voice carrying across the hushed room, "today we celebrate not just Lily's achievements, but the incredible journey that has brought us all here. The Thornbury Foundation was born out of tragedy, out of a desire to right wrongs and bring hope to those who had lost it. But it has grown into something far greater than we could have ever imagined." He paused, his eyes scanning the room. He saw familiar faces: Sarah Hawthorne, now retired but still a cherished friend and advisor; Dr. Harriet, the psychologist who had been so instrumental in Lily's healing; and countless families whose lives had been touched by the Foundation's work. "Today," Maxwell continued, "I'm honored to announce the next chapter in our mission. The Elizabeth Thornbury Memorial Scholarship will provide full university funding for young survivors of trauma who wish to pursue careers in fields dedicated to helping others. It is our hope that this program will create a new generation of healers, advocates, and changemakers, individuals who, like our own Lily, have the courage to transform their pain into purpose." The room erupted in applause, and Maxwell saw tears of joy and hope on many faces. As Lily joined him on the stage, he felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The scared, broken family they had once been had transformed into something powerful and beautiful, a force for change in the world. Later that evening, as the party wound down and the last guests departed, Maxwell and Lily found themselves in the stables. It had become their tradition over the years to end important days here among the horses that had played such a crucial role in their story. Stardust, now in her twilight years but still as regal as ever, nickered softly as they approached. Lily stroked the mare's nose, a faraway look in her eyes. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" Maxwell asked softly. Lily was quiet for a moment, her hand still moving gently over Stardust's velvety muzzle. "I was thinking about Mom," she finally said, "about how proud she would be of everything we've accomplished. And I was thinking about that little girl I used to be, so scared and alone. I wish I could go back and tell her that everything was going to be okay, that she would find her way home." Maxwell felt a lump form in his throat. He wrapped an arm around Lily's shoulders, marveling at how she had grown from that frightened child into the compassionate, determined young woman before him. "You know," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "in a way, that's exactly what you're doing with the Foundation, with this new scholarship program. You're reaching out to other scared, lonely children and showing them that there's hope, that they can find their way home too." Lily leaned into her father's embrace, a soft smile playing at her lips. "We're doing it together, Dad. We always have been." As they stood there in the quiet of the stables, the soft sounds of horses and the distant chirping of crickets filling the air, Maxwell felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of heartache, but there had also been joy, love, and the unbreakable bond between a father and daughter who had found each other against all odds. Thornbury Manor, once a symbol of loss and secrets, now stood as a beacon of hope and healing. The legacy of pain that had threatened to define their family had been transformed into a legacy of compassion and positive change. As they walked back to the house arm in arm under the starry sky, Maxwell knew that whatever challenges the future might hold, they would face them together. The story of the Thornberrys, of loss, of reunion, of healing and hope, would continue to ripple outward, touching lives and inspiring change for generations to come. And in that moment, surrounded by the gentle night and the warmth of his daughter's presence, Maxwell Thornberry felt a sense of gratitude so profound it brought tears to his eyes. For all the pain, all the struggle had led to this, a life filled with purpose, love, and the knowledge that even the deepest wounds could be transformed into wellsprings of hope. The autumn leaves crunched under Lily's feet as she walked across the bustling university campus. It had been 2 months since she'd left the familiar comfort of Thornberry Manor for the halls of academia, and each day brought new challenges and discoveries. As she made her way to her child psychology class, Lily couldn't help but reflect on how far she'd come. The scared little girl who had once found solace in the company of horses was now a confident young woman, pursuing her dream of helping other children heal from trauma. Professor Daniels's lecture today focused on resilience in children who had experienced adversity. As Lily took notes, she found herself drawing parallels to her own experiences and those of the children she'd met through the Thornberry Foundation. After class, as students filed out of the lecture hall, Professor Daniels called out, "Lily, could you stay back for a moment?" Approaching the professor's desk, Lily felt a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Is everything all right, Professor?" Professor Daniels smiled warmly. "More than all right, Lily. I've been following the work of the Thornberry Foundation, and I must say I'm incredibly impressed. Your personal insight into childhood trauma and resilience is evident in your coursework. I was wondering if you'd be interested in assisting me with a research project I'm starting." Lily's eyes widened with excitement. "I'd be honored, Professor. What's the project about?" "We're looking at innovative therapies for children who've experienced complex trauma. Your foundation's equine therapy program caught my attention. I think your first-hand experience could bring a unique perspective to our research." As Professor Daniels outlined the project, Lily felt a surge of excitement and purpose. This was an opportunity to bridge her academic studies with the practical work of the foundation, potentially helping even more children in the process. Later that evening, during her weekly video call with Maxwell, Lily shared the news about the research project. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Maxwell beamed with pride. "I always knew your experiences would make you an asset in this field. How are you feeling about balancing this with your studies and the foundation work?" Lily bit her lip, a familiar gesture that reminded Maxwell of Elizabeth. "I'm excited, Dad, but also a little nervous. It's a lot to take on, but I feel like this is what I'm meant to do, you know? Using everything I've been through to make a difference." Maxwell nodded, understanding. "You've always had a gift for turning challenges into opportunities, Lily. Just remember, it's okay to ask for help if you need it. The foundation team and I are always here to support you." As they continued to chat, catching up on foundation news and campus life, Lily felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. Despite the physical distance, her father's unwavering support remained a constant source of strength. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of classes, research meetings, and late-night study sessions. Lily threw herself into the research project, drawing on her personal experiences and the stories of the children she'd met through the foundation to provide valuable insights. One crisp Saturday morning, as Lily was poring over data in the university library, her phone buzzed with a message from the Foundation's program coordinator. "Emergency situation. New rescue, 9-year-old girl. Severe trauma. Not responding to traditional therapy. Your insight would be invaluable. Can you video call?" Lily's heart raced as she quickly packed up her books and headed for a quiet study room. As soon as she connected the video call, she was met with the concerned faces of the Foundation's therapy team. Dr. Rivera, the lead psychologist, quickly briefed her on the situation. "Her name is Sophie. She was rescued from a trafficking ring last week. She hasn't spoken a word since she arrived at the safe house. We've tried everything, Lily. I hate to interrupt your studies, but I remembered how you connected with Stardust when you first came to us. Do you think equine therapy might help?" Lily closed her eyes for a moment, memories of her own healing journey flooding back. When she opened them, her voice was filled with determination. "I think it's definitely worth trying. Can you set up a session for tomorrow? I'll drive down tonight." The next morning found Lily at the Foundation's Equine Therapy Center, her heart heavy with empathy, as she watched Sophie being led towards the stables. The girl's eyes were downcast, her small frame tense with fear and mistrust. Lily knelt down to Sophie's eye level, her voice gentle. "Hi, Sophie, I'm Lily. I know you're scared, and that's okay. I was scared too when I first came here. But I want to introduce you to a very special friend of mine. Her name is Hope." As if on cue, a beautiful chestnut mare ambled over to the fence. Hope was one of Stardust's descendants, bred and trained specifically for the Foundation's therapy program. Sophie's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the horse, the first real reaction they'd seen from her. "Would you like to say hello to Hope?" Lily asked softly. For a long moment, Sophie remained still, then almost imperceptibly she nodded. What followed was a breakthrough that brought tears to the eyes of the watching therapy team. As Sophie tentatively reached out to stroke Hope's nose, the tension in her small body began to ease. And when Hope gently nuzzled her hair, a tiny smile, the first they'd seen, flickered across Sophie's face. By the end of the session, Sophie still hadn't spoken, but her body language had transformed. She seemed more relaxed, more present. As they led her back to the house, she turned and waved goodbye to Hope, another small but significant step. That evening, as Lily prepared for the drive back to campus, Dr. Rivera approached her. "What you did today, Lily, but it was remarkable. You have a gift for this work." Lily smiled, feeling a mix of exhaustion and fulfillment. I just remembered what it felt like to be in her shoes. Sometimes, when words are too hard, the horses speak for us. As she drove back to the university under a canopy of stars, Lily's mind was abuzz with ideas. The day's experience had reaffirmed her belief in the power of equine therapy, and she couldn't wait to incorporate these insights into her research project. She also felt a renewed sense of purpose. Balancing her studies, the research, and her work with the Foundation would be challenging, but moments like today reminded her why it was all worthwhile. Lily Thornbury was no longer just the girl who had found her way home. She was becoming a beacon of hope for other lost children, helping them find their own paths to healing and redemption. And as the lights of the campus came into view, she felt ready to embrace whatever challenges and opportunities lay ahead, knowing that each step of her journey was making a difference in the lives of others. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the Thornbury Manor grounds, as Lily made her way up the familiar driveway. It was the start of winter break, and after months of intense study and work, she was looking forward to some quiet time at home. As she approached the main house, Lily saw a figure standing on the porch, her father, waiting to greet her with open arms. The moment she stepped out of the car, Lily was enveloped in a warm embrace. "Welcome home, sweetheart," Maxwell said, his voice filled with warmth and love. As they walked into the house, the familiar scents and sights of home washed over Lily. Mrs. Witherspoon, now retired but still a cherished part of the family, had prepared a welcome home dinner. The aroma of roast chicken, Lily's favorite, filled the air. Over dinner, Lily regaled Maxwell and Mrs. Witherspoon with stories from university life, her research project, and the Foundation's latest successes. As she spoke about Sophie, the young girl she had helped with equine therapy, Maxwell couldn't help but marvel at the poised and compassionate young woman his daughter had become. Later that evening, as they sat in Maxwell's study enjoying cups of hot cocoa, a comfortable silence fell between them. Lily's eyes wandered to the old photograph of Elizabeth on the desk, and a thoughtful expression crossed her face. "What's on your mind, Lily?" Maxwell asked gently. Lily took a deep breath. "Dad, I've been thinking, with all the work we're doing with the Foundation, all the children we're helping, I can't help but wonder about the others, the ones who were taken when I was." Maxwell felt his heart constrict. They had discussed this topic before, but it had always been painful. "What about them, sweetheart?" "I want to find them, Dad," Lily said, her voice filled with determination. "I want to help them like I was helped. They deserve to come home too." Maxwell nodded slowly, a mix of pride and concern washing over him. "It won't be easy, Lily. Many of those cases have gone cold, and revisiting that time, it could bring up a lot of difficult memories for you." Lily reached out and took her father's hand. "I know, Dad, but I also know that I'm stronger now. We both are. And if there's even a chance we could help reunite other families, don't we owe it to them to try?" As Maxwell looked into his daughter's eyes, He saw the same determination that had driven Elizabeth all those years ago. He realized that Lily wasn't asking for permission. She was inviting him to join her on this new mission. "All right," he said softly. "Where do we start?" The next morning found them in Maxwell's study, surrounded by old case files and newspaper clippings. They had reached out to Sarah Hawthorne, now retired from the police force but still a close family friend, for help in accessing old records. As they pored over the information, a pattern began to emerge. Several children who had gone missing around the same time as Lily had last been seen in small towns along the coast, not far from where Lily had been found. "Do you think they could have been using the same route to transport the children?" Lily mused, her brow furrowed in concentration. Maxwell nodded grimly. "It's possible. The coastline would have provided plenty of isolated spots for exchanges." As they delved deeper into the cases, Lily felt a growing sense of connection to these lost children. She couldn't remember them, but she knew they had shared a terrible ordeal. Each face in the missing persons reports seemed to call out to her, urging her to uncover the truth. Days passed, with Lily and Maxwell working tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. They created a map marking the locations of known sightings and possible routes. Slowly, a clearer picture began to form. Their investigation had led them here, following the trail of clues they had pieced together back at Thornbury Manor. With the help of Sarah Hawthorne and a small trusted team of investigators, they had managed to reopen several cold cases related to child disappearances in the area. As they made their way down the main street, Lily couldn't help but feel a strange sense of déjà vu. Though she had no concrete memories of this place, something about the salty air and the cry of seagulls tugged at the edges of her subconscious. "Dad," she said softly, coming to a stop in front of an old, boarded-up building. "This place, I think I've been here before." Maxwell turned to her, concern etched on his face. "Are you sure, sweetheart?" "What do you remember?" Lily closed her eyes, trying to grasp at the fleeting images in her mind. "It's not clear, just flashes. The smell of fish, a creaky wooden floor, and fear. So much fear." Maxwell placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his heart aching for the trauma his daughter had endured. "It's okay, Lily. We don't have to do this if it's too much." But Lily shook her head, her jaw set with determination. "No, Dad, we need to see this through, for the other children who might still be out there." As they continued their investigation, speaking with locals and poring over old records in the town hall, a clearer picture began to emerge. The annual Millhaven Fish Festival, it seemed, had been more than just a celebration of the town's maritime heritage. It had provided the perfect cover for a sinister operation. "Look at this," Lily said, pointing to an old festival program. There was a children's area set up right next to the docks. It would have been so easy to... She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Maxwell squeezed her hand, offering silent support. Their breakthrough came late in the afternoon, as the winter sun was beginning to set. An elderly shopkeeper, upon hearing their carefully worded inquiries, pulled them aside with a furtive glance. "I remember that year," she whispered, her rheumy eyes darting nervously. "There was a group of men, outsiders. They had a booth at the festival, said they were running some sort of children's charity, but there was something off about them. And then, after the festival, we heard about the missing children. I've carried that guilt for years, wondering if I should have said something." Lily and Maxwell exchanged a look of barely contained excitement. This was the first solid lead they'd had since starting their investigation. As they left the shop, Lily's phone buzzed with a message from Sarah Hawthorne. "Major development. Meet me at the hotel ASAP." Back in their hotel room, Sarah laid out a series of photographs on the bed. "We've identified one of the key players," she said, pointing to a grainy image of a man with a distinctive scar on his cheek. "His name is Victor Crane. He's been on our radar for years, but always managed to slip away. Until now." Lily stared at the photo, a chill running down her spine. Though she couldn't place him, something about the man's cold eyes triggered a visceral reaction of fear. "Where is he now?" Maxwell asked, his voice tense. Sarah's expression was grim. "That's the thing, we've tracked him to a compound just outside of town. But Max, Lily, this is bigger than we thought. We're not just dealing with a local trafficking ring. This goes international." The weight of this revelation settled heavily on the room. Lily felt a mix of emotions, fear, anger, and a fierce determination to see justice done. "What's our next move?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Sarah looked at them both, her eyes serious. "We're coordinating with federal authorities for a raid on the compound, but we need to move carefully. There's evidence that there might be children currently held there." Maxwell's face paled. "Current victims, after all this time?" Sarah nodded grimly. It seems they never stopped their operation. They just got better at hiding it. As they spent the next few hours planning and coordinating with Sarah's team, Lily felt a storm of emotions brewing inside her. The thought of other children enduring what she had been through filled her with a righteous anger, but also a profound sense of purpose. Late that night, as they prepared for what would undoubtedly be a challenging day ahead, Maxwell found Lily standing by the window looking out at the moonlit sea. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked gently. Lily turned to him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I was just thinking about Mom, about how proud she'd be of what we're doing. And I was thinking about the other children, the ones we might find tomorrow. Dad, what if we're too late for some of them?" Maxwell pulled his daughter into a tight embrace, his own eyes misting over. "We can't change the past, Lily. But what we're doing here now, it matters. Every child we can save, every family we can reunite, it matters." As they stood there, father and daughter united in their mission, the sea breeze carried the faint sound of waves crashing against the shore. Tomorrow would bring challenges, dangers, and perhaps heartbreak. But it would also bring the possibility of justice, of healing, of bringing light to the shadows that had for too long threatened the innocent. Lily Thornberry, once a lost child herself, was now on the verge of becoming a savior for others. And as she finally let her tears fall, safe in her father's arms, she silently renewed her vow to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The dawn would bring with it the next chapter in their quest for justice, and whatever lay ahead, Lily knew that the strength she had found through her own journey would light the way forward, not just for her, but for all the lost children still waiting to be found. The pre-dawn air was thick with tension, as Lily and Maxwell crouched behind a line of police vehicles, their breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. Before them loomed the compound, a sprawling, nondescript building that belied the horrors it potentially contained. Sarah Hawthorne's voice crackled over the radio, steady and determined. "All units in position. Remember, our priority is the safety of any potential victims inside. Move on my signal." Lily felt her heart pounding in her chest, a mix of fear and adrenaline coursing through her veins. Maxwell placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his eyes conveying a silent message of support and caution. "Are you sure you want to be here for this?" he asked softly, giving her one last chance to step back. Lily nodded, her jaw set with determination. "I need to see this through, Dad, for all of us who survived, and for those who didn't." The next few moments passed in a blur of motion and sound. On Sarah's signal, the raid began. The quiet morning erupted into a cacophony of shouted commands, breaking glass, and the thunderous sound of doors being breached. Lily and Maxwell, under strict instructions to stay back, watched as law enforcement teams swarmed the compound. Every fiber of Lily's being yearned to rush forward, to help, to do something. But she knew her role now was to wait, to be ready to offer support and comfort to any survivors they might find. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Then suddenly, a shout went up from within the compound. "We've got children here. Medical team, now." Lily's breath caught in her throat. They had been right. There were still victims being held, even after all these years. As the chaos of the raid began to settle, small figures began to emerge from the building, escorted by gentle-handed officers. Some were walking on their own, while others were being carried, too weak or too young to make it on their own. With a nod from Sarah, Lily and Maxwell moved forward, ready to offer whatever comfort they could. As they approached, Lily felt a wave of emotions wash over her. Sorrow for what these children had endured, rage at those who had hurt them, and a fierce protectiveness that surged from deep within her. One little girl, no more than 6 years old, caught Lily's eye. She was standing alone, looking lost and terrified amidst the commotion. Without hesitation, Lily knelt down beside her. "Hi there," she said softly, careful not to make any sudden movements. "My name is Lily. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The girl regarded Lily with wary eyes, but something in Lily's gentle demeanor seemed to reach her. "Emma," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Emma," Lily repeated, smiling warmly. "That's a beautiful name. I know you're scared right now, but I promise you, no one is going to hurt you anymore. We're here to help you." As she spoke, Lily slowly extended her hand, palm up, offering comfort without demanding it. After a moment's hesitation, Emma placed her tiny hand in Lily's. Over the next few hours, as the compound was secured and evidence collected, Lily and Maxwell worked tirelessly alongside the rescue teams. They offered comfort, blankets, and gentle words to the shell-shocked children. Lily found herself drawing on every ounce of her training and personal experience, using her unique perspective to connect with the young survivors in a way that others couldn't. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting a harsh light on the scene, the full scope of their discovery began to emerge. 23 children had been rescued, ranging in age from 3 to 16. Some had been missing for years, while others were more recent victims. The international scope of the operation was staggering, with children from multiple countries represented among the rescued. Amidst the flurry of activity, Sarah approached Lily and Maxwell, her face a mix of triumph and sorrow. "We got him," she said quietly. "Victor Crane is in custody, and we've uncovered enough evidence to bring down a significant portion of his network." Maxwell nodded grimly. "And the children? What happens to them now?" "We're working on identifying them and contacting their families," Sarah replied, "but it's going to be a long process. Some of these kids have been missing for so long their cases had gone cold. And for others," she trailed off, the implication clear, "some of these children might not have homes to return to." Lily, who had been listening while comforting a young boy, spoke up. "The foundation can help," she said firmly. "We have resources, support systems in place. We can provide a safe place for them while their situations are sorted out." Maxwell smiled at his daughter, pride shining in his eyes. "Of course, we'll make all the necessary arrangements. These children will have all the support we can provide." As the day wore on and the initial chaos of the raid settled into a more organized operation, Lily found a quiet moment to step away. She walked to the edge of the property, looking out over the sea that had once been a source of such fear and pain for her. Now it seemed to offer a sense of peace, of cleansing. Maxwell joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "How are you holding up, sweetheart?" Lily leaned into her father's embrace, feeling the weight of the day's events. "It's overwhelming," she admitted. "Seeing those children, knowing what they've been through, it brings back so much, but at the same time I feel, I don't know, grateful, I guess. Grateful that we could help, that we could be part of bringing them home." Maxwell pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "You were amazing today, Lily. The way you connected with those children, the comfort you provided. You've turned your pain into a powerful force for good. Your mother would be so proud of you." "I know I am." As they stood there, watching the sun begin its descent towards the horizon, Lily felt a sense of completion, of coming full circle. The lost, frightened child she had once been had grown into a woman capable of offering hope and healing to others who were still lost. But she also knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The children rescued today were just the tip of the iceberg. There was still so much work to be done, so many lives to be saved and rebuilt. "Dad," Lily said, turning to face Maxwell, "I know what I want to do with my life. I want to expand the Foundation's work. I want to create a global network of support for children who've been through trauma like this. We can use what we've learned, the connections we've made, to make a real difference." Maxwell nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Lily, and I'll be right there beside you, every step of the way." As they made their way back to the compound, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, Lily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Thornberry legacy, born from pain and nurtured by love, was evolving into something greater than she could have ever imagined. The journey ahead would be long and often difficult. There would be setbacks, heartbreaks, and moments of doubt. But there would also be triumphs, moments of joy, and lives forever changed for the better. And for Lily Thornberry, once a lost child herself, now a beacon of hope for others, that was more than enough reason to keep moving forward, one rescued child at a time. The weeks following the raid on Victor Crane's compound were a whirlwind of activity for Lily and Maxwell Thornberry. Thornberry Manor, once a quiet sanctuary, had been transformed into a haven for the rescued children. The grand ballroom now echoed with the sounds of young voices, some tentative and fearful, others gradually regaining the exuberance of childhood. Lily stood at the entrance of the makeshift dormitory, watching as a team of child psychologists and social workers worked tirelessly with the young survivors. Her heart swelled with a mixture of sorrow and hope as she observed their gentle interactions. "How are they doing?" Maxwell asked softly, coming to stand beside his daughter. Lily sighed, running a hand through her hair. "It's a long road ahead, Dad. Some of them are starting to open up, but others, the trauma runs so deep." Maxwell nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "We'll give them all the time and support they need, just like we did for you." As they watched, a small commotion broke out in one corner of the room. A young boy, no more than 8 years old, was curled up in a ball, rocking back and forth and refusing to be touched. The social worker, attempting to comfort him, looked up at Lily with a pleading expression. Without hesitation, Lily made her way over, kneeling down a short distance from the distressed child. "Hi there," she said softly. "My name is Lily. Can you tell me yours?" The boy didn't respond, continuing to rock back and forth. Lily didn't push, simply sitting quietly nearby. After a few moments, she began to hum softly, the same lullaby that had once soothed her in her darkest moments. Gradually, the boy's rocking slowed. He peeked out from behind his arms, his tear-streaked face regarding Lily with a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I know you're scared," Lily continued gently. "I was scared too when I was your age, but you're safe now. No one here will hurt you." Something in Lily's voice, in the empathy that radiated from her, seemed to reach the child. Slowly he uncurled from his protective ball. "Marco," he whispered. "My name is Marco." Lily smiled warmly. "It's nice to meet you, Marco. Would you like to come with me? There's someone I'd like you to meet." Hand in hand, Lily led Marco out to the stables. As they approached, the soft nickering of horses filled the air. Marco's eyes widened as he saw the gentle giants. "This is Hope," Lily said, introducing him to the chestnut mare. "She's very special. She helps kids like us feel better." As Marco tentatively reached out to stroke Hope's velvety nose, Lily felt a wave of emotion wash over her. This was why she had pushed so hard for the equine therapy program. She knew firsthand the healing power of these magnificent animals. Over the next few hours, Lily worked patiently with Marco and Hope. By the end of the session, the boy was smiling. A small, fragile thing, but a smile nonetheless. It was a breakthrough that brought tears to Lily's eyes. Later that evening, as Lily was reviewing case files in her father's study, Maxwell entered with a steaming mug of tea. "You've been at this for hours, sweetheart." "You need to rest too, you know." Lily accepted the tea gratefully, leaning back in her chair with a sigh. "I know, Dad. It's just, there's so much to do. We're making progress with the children here. But what about all the others out there? Crane's network was huge. We've only scratched the surface." Maxwell sat down across from her, his face serious. "I've been thinking about that too. I've had some calls with our legal team and some international contacts. Lily, I think it's time we took the Thornbury Foundation global." Lily's eyes widened. "Global? You mean..." "I mean expanding our operations, setting up centers like this in other countries. We have the resources, the expertise. And now, with your first-hand experience and your studies, we have a unique perspective to offer." The magnitude of what her father was proposing took Lily's breath away. It was daunting, but also thrilling. This was the chance to make a real, lasting difference on a scale they had never imagined before. "It won't be easy," Maxwell continued. "We'll face bureaucratic hurdles, cultural differences. But I believe we can do it. What do you think?" Lily was quiet for a moment, her mind racing with possibilities. Then, slowly, a determined smile spread across her face. "I think it's exactly what we need to do, Dad. These children, wherever they are in the world, deserve a chance at healing. At a real life." As they spent the next few hours outlining their plans for the Foundation's expansion, Lily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The work ahead would be challenging, but the potential impact was immeasurable. Later that night, as Lily made her final rounds checking on the sleeping children, she paused at Marco's bed. The boy was sleeping peacefully, clutching a small stuffed horse that Lily had given him earlier. The sight filled her heart with a bittersweet joy. She thought back to her own journey, to the scared little girl she had once been. That girl could never have imagined standing here, on the cusp of a global mission to help other children find their way home. As she quietly left the dormitory, Lily's resolve strengthened. The Thornbury legacy was evolving, growing beyond the walls of the manor and reaching out to embrace children in need around the world. The path ahead would be long and often difficult, but Lily knew she was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With her father by her side and the strength she had found through her own healing journey, she was prepared to light the way for countless other lost children, guiding them towards hope, healing, and a brighter future. As the moon rose over Thornbury Manor, casting a soft glow over the peaceful grounds, Lily felt a sense of peace settle over her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to make a difference, and she was ready to meet them head-on, armed with compassion, determination, and the unshakable belief that every child deserved a chance to find their way home. The air in the conference room crackled with anticipation as Lily stood before a diverse group of international delegates. Representatives from child protection agencies, law enforcement, and NGOs from around the world had gathered at Thornbury Manor for a landmark summit. Lily took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the room before settling on her father's encouraging smile in the front row. This was the moment they had been working towards for months, the official launch of the Thornbury Foundation's global initiative. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lily began, her voice steady and filled with quiet conviction. "We stand here today united by a common purpose, to protect the most vulnerable among us, to give voice to those who have been silenced, and to bring light to the darkest corners of our world." As Lily outlined the Foundation's plans for international expansion, including trauma-informed care centers, equine therapy programs, and a global network for tracking and rescuing trafficked children, she could see the impact her words were having. Faces that had been politely attentive at the start now leaned forward with growing enthusiasm. "What we propose is not just a series of programs," Lily continued, her passion evident in every word. "It's a fundamental shift in how we approach the rehabilitation of traumatized children. By combining cutting-edge therapeutic techniques with the compassion and understanding that can only come from lived experience, we believe we can create a model that will transform lives around the world." As she concluded her presentation, the room erupted in applause. Questions flew from all corners, about funding, about implementation, about cross-border cooperation. Lily and Maxwell, along with their team of experts, fielded each query with confidence and clarity. By the end of the day, as the sun set over Thornbury Manor, casting a golden glow across the grounds, the Foundation had secured partnerships with agencies in 12 countries. It was a staggering success, far beyond what they had dared to hope for. Later that evening, as the last of the delegates departed, Lily found herself in the stables, seeking a moment of quiet reflection. As she stroked Stardust's descendant, Hope, she heard familiar footsteps approaching. "You were magnificent today, sweetheart," Maxwell said, pride evident in his voice. "Your mother would have been so proud." Lily turned to her father, her eyes shining with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. "I still can't quite believe it, Dad. All those people from all over the world ready to work with us. It's overwhelming." Maxwell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It is. But if anyone can handle it, it's you, Lily. You've come so far, grown so much. You're not just carrying on the Thornbury legacy, you're expanding it in ways we never could have imagined." As they stood there in the peaceful quiet of the stables, Lily's mind wandered to the journey that had brought them to this point. From the terrified child she had once been, to the woman she was now, someone capable of standing before world leaders and advocating for change. "You know," Lily said softly, "I've been thinking about something. All those years ago when I was lost, I always felt like there was something guiding me, protecting me. I used to think it was just luck or maybe my subconscious remembering things. But now, I can't help but wonder if it was Mom, somehow watching over me." Maxwell's eyes misted over as he pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "I believe she was, Lily, and I believe she still is, watching over both of us and all the children we're trying to help." As they made their way back to the manor, the weight of the day's events and the magnitude of the task ahead settled over them. But it was a weight tempered by hope, by the knowledge that they were embarking on something truly meaningful. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Lily found herself traveling the globe, overseeing the establishment of new Thornbury Foundation centers in countries from Brazil to Thailand, from South Africa to Romania. Each location presented its own unique challenges, but also its own rewards. In a small village in India, Lily watched with tears in her eyes as a group of rescued girls performed a traditional dance, their faces alight with joy and newfound confidence. In a bustling city in Colombia, she sat in on a group therapy session where teenage boys, once forced into criminal activities, now spoke of their dreams for the future. With each success, each life touched, the foundation's reputation grew. Governments began to take notice, implementing policies based on the Thornbury model. Law enforcement agencies around the world started working more closely together, sharing information and resources in the fight against child trafficking. But for all the global impact, it was the individual moments that touched Lily's heart the most. Like the day she received a video call from Marco, the boy she had first connected with through equine therapy. Now thriving in his adoptive home, Marco proudly showed off his latest art project, a painting of Hope, the horse that had helped him begin his healing journey. As the Thornbury Foundation's first year of global operations drew to a close, Lily found herself once again standing before a gathering at the manor. This time, however, the audience was made up of the Foundation's staff and volunteers from around the world, many of whom were survivors themselves. "A year ago," Lily began, her voice filled with emotion, "we set out on a mission that many thought was impossible, to create a global network of healing, of hope, for children who had endured the unimaginable. Today, as I look at all of you, I see that impossible dream becoming a reality." She paused, her eyes scanning the room, taking in the faces of those who had become more than colleagues. They were family, but our work is far from over. For every child we've helped, there are thousands more out there still waiting to be found, still waiting for someone to show them the way home. And I promise you this, we will not rest until every last one of them is safe, loved, and given the chance at the future they deserve. As applause filled the room, Lily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The journey ahead would be long and often difficult, but she knew she wasn't walking it alone. She had her father, her extended Thornbury family, and the spirit of her mother guiding her every step of the way. And as she looked out over the grounds of Thornbury Manor, now a beacon of hope for children around the world, Lily knew that this was just the beginning. The legacy of love, healing, and hope that had started with one lost little girl had grown into a global force for change. And with every child saved, every life transformed, that legacy would continue to grow, touching lives and healing hearts for generations to come. The sun set on Thornbury Manor, casting a warm glow over the estate. But for Lily Thornbury and the countless lives she had touched, a new dawn was just beginning, a dawn of hope, of healing, and of endless possibilities for a brighter future. 5 years had passed since the Thornbury Foundation had gone global, and the world had changed in ways Lily could never have imagined. She stood at the window of her office in New York City, watching the bustling streets below. At 30, Lily had become a respected figure in the field of child advocacy and trauma recovery, her work lauded by experts and governments alike. A gentle knock at the door pulled her from her reverie. "Come in," she called, turning to see her assistant, Jamie, enter with a stack of files. Without hesitation, she picked up the phone again, dialing a familiar number. "Dad?" she said when Maxwell answered. "We need to talk. It's about Crane." "He's back." Within hours, Lily was on a private jet back to Thornbury Manor, her mind churning with plans and possibilities. As the familiar landscape came into view, she felt a surge of emotion. This place, once a symbol of her lost childhood, had become the heart of a global mission of hope and healing. And now it seemed, it would once again be the staging ground for a battle against the darkness that had shaped her life. As the car pulled up to the manor, Lily saw her father waiting on the steps. Despite the grey in his hair and the lines etched by years of both joy and worry, Maxwell Thornbury still stood tall, his eyes bright with the same determination that had driven him to find his lost daughter all those years ago. "Lily," he said, pulling her into a tight embrace. "I've already contacted Sarah. She's on her way with a team. We'll find Crane, sweetheart. We'll end this once and for all." Lily nodded against her father's shoulder, drawing strength from his unwavering support. As they entered the manor, she caught sight of a photograph on the wall, a younger version of herself, smiling astride stardust. The image reminded her of how far she'd come, of the strength she'd found within herself. "You're right, Dad," she said, her voice filled with quiet resolve. "It's time to close this chapter for good. Not just for me, not just for Eleanor and Sophie, but for every child who's ever lived in fear of monsters like Crane." As night fell over Thornbury Manor, lights blazed in the windows. In the study, Lily, Maxwell, and a team of their most trusted allies pored over maps, reports, and Elena's information. The hunt for Victor Crane had begun anew. Lily stood at the center of it all, her face set with determination. The scared little girl she had once been was long gone, replaced by a woman who had turned her pain into purpose, her fear into fierce resolve. As she looked around at the dedicated faces of her team, Lily felt a surge of hope. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever darkness they might face, she knew one thing with absolute certainty: they would face it together, and they would triumph. For in the end, the legacy of the Thornburys, a legacy of love, resilience, and unwavering hope, was stronger than any evil they might encounter. And Lily was ready to prove it, once and for all. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity at Thornbury Manor. The estate, once a peaceful haven, had been transformed into a command center for the operation to find Victor Crane and rescue Eleanor and Sophie. Lily found herself at the heart of it all, coordinating efforts with law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. Late one night, as Lily pored over satellite images and intelligence reports in her father's study, a soft knock at the door drew her attention. Maxwell entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs of tea. "You need to rest, sweetheart," he said gently, setting one of the mugs beside her. Lily sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "I can't, Dad. Not while Crane is still out there. Not while that little girl is in danger." Maxwell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know. But you won't be any help to Eleanor or Sophie if you run yourself into the ground. Your mother always said that sometimes, to see the light, you need to step back from the shadows." At the mention of her mother, Lily felt a familiar ache in her chest. She picked up the framed photo on the desk, Elizabeth Thornbury, radiant and strong, sitting atop her favorite horse. "I wish she was here, Dad. I feel like I need her guidance now more than ever." Maxwell placed a comforting hand on his daughter's shoulder. "She is here, Lily. In you. Every time you fight for a child, every time you refuse to give up hope, that's Elizabeth shining through." Their moment was interrupted by an urgent knock. Sarah Hawthorne, now a senior advisor to the foundation, burst into the room, her face alight with excitement. "We've got something," she announced. "One of our contacts in Eastern Europe has reported a sighting. A man matching Crane's description, traveling with a woman and young girl. They were seen boarding a ferry to a small island off the coast of Croatia." Lily was on her feet in an instant, her fatigue forgotten. "That has to be them. Elena said Crane had property in Croatia. We need to move now." The next few hours were a blur of preparation. As dawn broke over Thornbury Manor, Lily found herself on a private jet, surrounded by a team of specially trained operatives. Her father had insisted on coming, despite her protests about his safety. "We started this journey together," Maxwell had said firmly. "We'll end it together." As the Croatian coastline came into view, Lily felt a mix of emotions churning within her. Fear, determination, and a fierce protectiveness for the child she had never met but felt inexplicably connected to. The island, when they reached it, was a study in contrasts. Beautiful beaches and lush vegetation concealed a network of caves and hidden structures, the perfect hiding place for someone like Crane. As they approached the compound where Elena and Sophie were believed to be held, Lily's heart raced. This was it, the moment when they would finally confront the man who had cast such a long shadow over her life. The operation unfolded with precision. Teams moved into position surrounding the compound. Lily, against the wishes of the tactical team, insisted on being part of the entry group. As they breached the main building, the sound of a child's terrified scream pierced the air. "Sophie!" Lily called out, her voice filled with a mixture of fear and determination. What followed was a tense standoff. Victor Crane, older but still imposing, stood in the center of a lavishly decorated room. He held a terrified Sophie in front of him like a shield, while Elena stood to the side, her face a mask of anguish. "Well, well," Crane sneered, his cold eyes fixed on Lily. "The prodigal daughter returns. You've caused me quite a bit of trouble, Miss Thornbury." Lily stood her ground, her voice steady as she addressed the frightened child. "Sophie, sweetheart, it's going to be okay. We're here to take you home." As Crane began a monologue about his grand plans and the injustice of his persecution, Lily caught Elena's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. In a moment of distraction, Elena lunged for her daughter while Lily tackled Crane. The ensuing struggle was brief but violent. As the tactical team swarmed in, Lily found herself face to face with the man who had haunted her nightmares for so long. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected: fear. "It's over, Crane," Lily said, her voice filled with quiet triumph. "You have no power here. Not anymore." As Crane was led away in handcuffs, Lily turned her attention to Elena and Sophie. The little girl clung to her mother, sobbing in relief. Eleanor looked at Lily, her eyes filled with gratitude and something else: hope. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, "for everything." In the aftermath of the raid, as the island swarmed with law enforcement and medical personnel, Lily found a quiet moment to stand on the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. She felt her father's presence before she saw him. Maxwell stood beside her, watching the waves crash against the shore. "It's really over, isn't it?" Lily said softly. Maxwell nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It is. You did it, Lily. You've broken the cycle. Crane will face justice, and more importantly, you've given Elena and Sophie a chance at a new life." As they stood there, watching the last light fade from the sky, Lily felt a profound sense of peace wash over her. The shadows that had haunted her for so long seemed to recede, replaced by a warm, glowing hope for the future. She thought of all the children the foundation had helped, of the lives touched and transformed, and she thought of the little girl she had once been, lost and afraid. That girl had found her way home, had found her strength, and now she had used that strength to light the way for others. As night fell over the island, stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse of sky. Lily looked up, feeling a connection to something greater than herself. In that moment, she could almost hear her mother's voice on the breeze, whispering words of love and pride. The Thornbury legacy, born from pain and nurtured by love, had become a beacon of hope for the world. And as Lily turned to walk back to the waiting team, ready to begin the next chapter of their mission, she knew that this legacy would continue to grow, touching lives and healing hearts for generations to come. For in the end, it was not the darkness that defined them, but the light they chose to shine in spite of it, and that light Lily knew would never be extinguished. The months following Victor Crane's capture were a whirlwind of activity for Lily and the Thornbury Foundation. As the dust settled and the legal proceedings against Crane began, Lily found herself facing a new set of challenges and opportunities. On a crisp autumn morning, Lily stood before a packed auditorium at the United Nations headquarters in New York. The faces of world leaders, NGO representatives, and child advocacy experts looked back at her, their expressions a mix of curiosity and admiration. "Ladies and gentlemen," Lily began, her voice steady and clear, "the capture of Victor Crane was not an end, but a beginning. It has opened our eyes to the vast network of child exploitation that still exists in our world. But it has also shown us what we can achieve when we work together, across borders and agencies, with a single purpose: to protect the most vulnerable among us." As Lily outlined the Thornbury Foundation's new global initiative, a comprehensive program to identify and dismantle child trafficking networks, she could see the impact her words were having. Heads nodded in agreement, pens scribbled furiously taking notes, and a palpable sense of hope filled the room. After her speech, as Lily fielded questions from reporters and delegates, she felt a gentle tap on her shoulder. Turning, she found herself face to face with Elena Crane and young Sophie. "Lily," Elena said softly, her eyes brimming with emotion, "we wanted to thank you in person. What you've done for us, for so many others, it's beyond words." Sophie, now 7 and slowly recovering from her ordeal, looked up at Lily with wide, curious eyes. "Are you the lady who saves kids?" she asked innocently. Lily knelt down to Sophie's level, her heart swelling with a mixture of sadness and hope. "I try to help, sweetie, but you know what? You're pretty brave yourself. And one day, if you want, you could help other kids too." As Eleanor and Sophie melted back into the crowd, Lily felt a renewed sense of purpose wash over her. This was why she did what she did. not for recognition or accolades, but for moments like this, moments when she could see the direct impact of her work on individual lives. Later that evening, as Lily sat in her hotel room reviewing the day's events, her phone buzzed with an incoming video call. She smiled as her father's face appeared on the screen. "You were magnificent today, sweetheart," Maxwell said, pride evident in his voice. "I watched the whole thing live. Your mother would have been so proud." Lily felt a familiar pang at the mention of her mother, but it was tempered now by a warm sense of connection. "Thanks, Dad. I felt her there with me, you know, like she was guiding my words." Maxwell nodded, understanding in his eyes. "She always is, Lily. In everything you do." He paused, a mischievous glint appearing in his eye. "Now are you ready for your next big challenge?" Lily raised an eyebrow. "Oh, and what might that be?" "Well," Maxwell chuckled, "it seems your speech has caused quite a stir. The president called. He wants to meet with you to discuss implementing some of your proposals on a national level." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "The president? Dad, that's huge." "It is," Maxwell agreed. "And it's just the beginning, Lily. The work you're doing, the changes you're making, they're going to reshape how the world protects its children. I couldn't be more proud of you." As the call ended, Lily stood and walked to the window, looking out over the glittering New York skyline. She thought about how far she'd come from that scared little girl in the stables of Thornbury Manor, about all the children she'd helped, and all those still waiting to be saved. The path ahead would be challenging, she knew. Changing policies, reshaping institutions, fighting against deeply entrenched systems of exploitation, none of it would be easy. But as she stood there, bathed in the glow of the city lights, Lily Thornbury felt ready to face whatever lay ahead. For she was no longer just Lily, the lost girl who found her way home. She was Lily Thornbury, a beacon of hope for lost children everywhere, and she was just getting started. As she turned away from the window, already mentally preparing for the meetings and challenges that lay ahead, Lily felt a sense of excitement and purpose that energized her to her very core. The Thornbury legacy was evolving once again, reaching further and touching more lives than ever before, and Lily was ready to lead the charge, one child, one family, one nation at a time. The soft glow of dawn was just beginning to paint the sky as Lily Thornbury stood on the balcony of her Washington, D.C. apartment. In her hand, she clutched a steaming mug of coffee, its warmth a stark contrast to the crisp morning air. It had been a year since her groundbreaking speech at the UN, a year of relentless work, challenges, and triumphs. The Thornbury Initiative, as it had come to be known, was now being implemented in countries around the world. Laws were being rewritten, resources reallocated, and most importantly, children were being saved. As Lily looked out over the awakening city, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Elena Crane. "Thought you'd want to see this," the message read, followed by a photo. Lily's breath caught as she opened it. There was Sophie beaming at the camera, proudly holding up a school project, a poster about child advocacy, with the Thornbury Foundation logo prominently displayed. Lily felt tears prick at her eyes. This was why she did what she did. Not for the accolades or the high-level meetings, but for moments like this, seeing a child who had been through hell now thriving, using her experience to help others. As she was about to reply, another message came through, this time from her father. "Turn on the news, sweetheart. Channel 7. Curious, Lily stepped back inside and flicked on the television. Her eyes widened as she saw her own face on the screen, alongside a breaking news banner. "In a historic move," the anchor was saying, "President Clarissa Mitchell has announced the creation of a new cabinet-level position, the Department of Child Welfare and Protection. And in an unprecedented decision, she has named Lily Thornbury, founder of the globally recognized Thornbury Foundation, as its first secretary." Lily sank onto her couch, her mind reeling. A cabinet position. Her. It seemed impossible, overwhelming. And yet, her phone rang. It was her father. "Dad," she said, her voice shaky. "Did you know about this?" Maxwell's warm chuckle came through the line. "I had an inkling. The president called me last week asking about you. I think she wanted to make sure you were up for the challenge." "And what did you tell her?" Lily asked, still trying to process the news. "I told her the truth," Maxwell said simply. "That you are the strongest, most compassionate, and most determined person I know. that if anyone can reshape how this country, how this world protects its children, it's you. Lily felt a lump form in her throat. Dad, I don't know if I'm ready for this. Lily, Maxwell's voice was gentle but firm. Do you remember what you told me the day we decided to take the foundation global? You said, these children, wherever they are in the world, deserve a chance at healing, at a real life. This is your chance to make that happen on an even bigger scale. As they talked, Lily's initial shock began to give way to a sense of purpose. This was an opportunity to effect change at the highest levels, to build a system that truly put children first. After hanging up with her father, Lily took a deep breath and dialed the number the White House had provided. It was time to accept her new role, to take on this immense responsibility. In the whirlwind of activity that followed, press conferences, briefings, meetings with her transition team, Lily found moments of quiet reflection. She thought about her own journey, about the scared little girl she had once been, about her mother, whose love and sacrifice had set this all in motion, about her father, whose unwavering support had been her rock through it all. A week later, as Lily stood in the Oval Office, hand raised as she took the oath of office, she felt the weight of history on her shoulders. But she also felt a profound sense of rightness, of coming full circle. As President Mitchell shook her hand and the cameras flashed, Lily's mind wasn't on the historical nature of the moment or the challenges that lay ahead. Instead, she was thinking of a little girl named Sophie, of the thousands of children in shelters and foster homes across the country, of the countless others still waiting to be rescued. I won't let you down, she whispered, a promise to all of them. Later that evening, as Lily stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, looking out over the reflecting pool, she felt a presence beside her. Turning, she saw her father, his eyes shining with pride and unshed tears. Your mother would be so proud, Maxwell said softly, echoing the words he had said so many times before, but this time Lily felt their truth deep in her bones. I know, she replied, linking her arm through his. And I feel her with me, Dad. In everything I do. As they stood there, father and daughter, the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. It was a new dawn, not just for Lily, but for every child who had ever felt lost, afraid, or forgotten. The Thornbury legacy had grown from a personal mission of healing into a global movement, and now into a fundamental shift in how a nation, and perhaps the world, viewed and valued its most vulnerable citizens. As the first stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Lily Thornbury looked to the future with hope, determination, and an unshakable commitment to the cause that had shaped her life. For in the end, it wasn't about titles or positions. It was about every child everywhere having the chance to find their way home, and Lily was ready to light the way, one step at a time.